Hello everyone, a very warm welcome to all of you to yet another lecture in the whole lecture series for Sociology Optional. And the topic that we're going to start today, okay, it is the most important topic for Sociology Optional paper 1, because today we are starting with unit 4, that is sociological thinkers. Okay, sociological thinkers. Okay, it is the most important unit in paper 1, because every year you can expect at least 5 to 6 questions minimum. Okay, 5 to 6 questions minimum from this particular unit itself. Okay, so try to be very attentive. At the same time, I request you to be not to be only passive audience. Try to also have an open mind. At the same time, you can come up with your own kind of an examples, okay, so that it can inculcate the habit of thinking. Okay, आप लोग थोड़ा सा सोचिए, okay, सोचने की हैबिट इंकलकेट करिए, बिकॉज अगर आप सोचेंगे तभी आप किसी भी तरह का क्वेश्चन दैट comes from unit 4 you'll be able to tackle it. Okay, so don't depend too much कि मैं आपको सब कुछ बताऊं. Okay, वैसे my view or my agenda is to tell you each and everything so that you can tackle each and every kind of a question, but I also want you to be very interactive. Okay, try to be not only a passive audience, but also try to explore more and more. Okay, so let's start with the session. Okay, so before we start, okay, I just wanted to mention that today we are looking into the Karl Marx. Okay, today we are looking into the Karl Marx. That is the first thinker under unit 4. Okay, here it has various subparts, but today we'll be dealing with historical materialism. Okay, plus we will also dealing with the mode of production. Okay, in part B we'll be talking about the class and class conflicts, and then we will be talking about the alienation plus some concepts which can arise as from which UPSC can ask 10 marker question. I'll be telling you all the concepts, okay, in a very simple layman language. So my idea is to demystify the whole thinkers. Okay, the basic aim purpose of today's lecture, or the basic purpose of this whole sociology optional lecture has been to demystify sociology. मेरा काम है कि मैं आपको सारी चीज बहुत ही सिंपल लैंग्वेज में बताऊं. ओके, सो दैट यू कैन एटलीस्ट अंडरस्टैंड एंड कनेक्ट एवरीथिंग. जो भी एग्जाम्पल्स हैं, ओके, आप उस तरह के एग्जाम्पल्स ट्राई टू थिंक. ओके, सो दैट यू कैन ऑल्सो invent a new kind of an example that fits into the whatever concepts we are studying. Okay, so let's start with the today's session. See, as per the convention जो हम लोग अभी तक follow करते आ रहे हैं, what we are doing is that I'm going to show you all the subunits that are part of this sociological thinkers unit 4. So first one is Karl Marx. Okay, Karl Marx, we are dealing here, it has 4 subparts: historical materialism, mode of production. Okay, and then we have alienation and class struggle. So we'll be today we'll be dealing with historical materialism and mode of production only. In part B we'll be dealing with alienation and class struggle. Okay, after that we will come to M.A. Durkheim as a sociological thinker. हम इसके बारे में बहुत ज़्यादा डिटेल में, सारे thinkers के बारे में इनफैक्ट डिटेल्स में देखेंगे. Okay, Max Weber, Talcott Parsons. Okay, very important thinkers. In fact, each and every thinker is very important. Okay, you cannot think कि भाई मैं आज ये पढ़ लेता हूँ इस बार और ये छोड़ देता हूँ, ऐसा नहीं है. सब कुछ पढ़ के जाना है इस यूनिट में. एक भी थिंकर नहीं छोड़ना चाहिए, एक भी कॉन्सेप्ट नहीं छोड़ना चाहिए. ओके, प्लस आर्किमर्टन एंड जॉर्ज हर्बर्ट मीड. ओके, सो let's see, I have already told you that we'll be talking about Karl Marx today, historical materialism and mode of production. Okay, so let's move to the next slide. Again, I am going to show you the kind of question that have been asked from this particular topic, okay, of Karl Marx. I'm showing the holistic questions, not only related with historical materialism or mode of production. I'm showing you the all questions from Karl Marx. Okay, तो जैसे ही पार्ट ए और पार्ट बी आपका खत्म होगा, ये सारे क्वेश्चंस आप आसानी से कर सकते हैं. ठीक है, सो लेट्स सी ऑल दिस क्वेश्चंस वन बाय वन. फर्स्ट इज critically examine the dialectics involved in each mode of production as propounded by Karl Marx. Okay, इसमें देखिए डायरेक्टिव क्या है, व्हाट इज द डायरेक्टिव, क्रिटिकली एग्जामिन, ओके, critically examine the dialectics involved in each mode of production as propounded by Karl Marx. Okay, it was asked in 2021, 20 marker, 250 words. Okay, so dialectics, मैं आपको dialectics बहुत ही simple language बताने की कोशिश करूँगा. I'll try to tell you in a very layman language. Okay, but I also want to have a very open-minded. Okay, try to come up with more and more, you know, examples. Okay, next is critically assess the Marxian theory of alienation. Okay, Marxian theory of alienation. Alienation हम लोग इस part पे नहीं करेंगे, part B में will cover the alienation part. Okay, it was asked in 2020, 10 marker and 150 words. Okay, next is what is the Marxist concept of fetishism of commodities. Okay, yet again, you know, 10 marker 2019, 10 marker. See, 21, 20, 19. Continuously they have been asking question from Marx. Okay, next is according to Marx, how are human beings alienated, from their human potential? Okay, and what does he suggest to change this? Again, when we'll deal with alienation part, you'll be able to tackle this question. So don't get, you know, frightened because I'm using the word dialectics, I'm using the word, you know, alienation, fetishism of commodities. ये सब बहुत आसान है, they are very easy. Okay, you just need to pay attention. Next is analyze the Marxian conception of historical materialism. Again, very common question, very, you know, very easy concept, not that much difficult. Okay, I'll tell you, as a critique of Hegelian dialectics. Okay, as a critique of Hegelian dialectics. Okay, so it was asked in 2017, 20 marker, 250 words. Okay, next is identify the similarities and differences between the Marx theory of alienation and Durkheim theory of anomie. Okay, Marx theory of alienation, Durkheim theory of anomie. It was asked in 2014, 20 marker and 250 words. Okay, next is according to the Marx, capitalism transforms even the personal relationship, okay, between the men and women. Critically examine the illustration from the contemporary Indian context. Okay, so for that you need to understand what is capitalism. Okay, so all those things, you know, because here in this question they are asking about the, you know, the practical significance of, you know, or what is, you know, what because of capitalism, you know, how the you know, you can say the Indian society changed. Okay, or how the personal relation between men and women changed because of capitalism. Okay, and you have to give an example of Indian society. It was asked in 2014, 10 marker, 150 words. Okay, so all the questions, everything, they are very easy. Don't feel that, you know, it's very difficult or something of that sort. Okay, now first thing first, let's start with the session. Okay, Karl Marx. Okay, Karl Marx. Now before we start with his theory and everything, okay, we need to look into something like, you know, some personal life background. Okay, so that you can develop a kind of a perspective. Okay, आपको एक idea हो जाए. Like he was born in, right, he was born in Trier, T-R-I-E-R, Trier in Germany. Okay, Germany in 1818. Now this 1818 or this 19th century, early 19th century has lot of significance. Okay, it has lot of significance. You know, if you have looked into, I wanted to go and look into again this emergence of sociology. Okay, that very first lecture, lecture 1. Okay, so you can easily connect because this year has lot of significance, or this era has lot of significance, to be very, you know, precise. ये जो समय है, okay, 1818, it has lot of significance. Okay, second is that his father was a, you know, his father was a lawyer. So basically Karl Marx belonged to a upper middle class. Okay, upper middle class. Okay, so Karl Marx, you know, belonged to a upper middle class. So see, ये सब आपको इसलिए बता रहा हूँ so that you have a, you know, even if, you know, you just have a basic understanding. That's it. Okay, theories we will deal with later. Okay, all the theories I'll you know, explain it to you in a very, you know, simple language. I'll try my best to explain it to you in a very simple language. Okay, Apart from that, what happened is that, he studied, Karl Marx studied, law and philosophy from University of Berlin and Bonn in Germany. Okay, Berlin and Bonn in Germany. Okay, very simple. There is nothing to ponder over. Okay, and what happened that originally, the family was Jewish. Originally the family was Jewish. Okay, originally the family was Jewish, and later they converted to Christianity. Okay, very simple. Later they converted to Christianity. Now, when Karl Marx was very young, he used to have a radical ideas. He used to write a lot against the kings and everybody about the state of affairs in the society. So what happened, he had a very radical ideas, okay, against the state of affairs in the society. He was writing against the king and everybody. So what happened, he was kind of thrown out of the state. He became stateless. Okay, so as a process, he started, he moved from Germany to Paris to Brussels, and finally he settled in London. Okay, so you can just I'll just write it. He moved from Germany to Paris to Brussels, and finally settled in London. By the time he settled in London, he became very, very poor. Okay, he became very poor to the extent that some of the children of Karl Marx died due to starvation. So he was very kind of very poor. He became very poor. Okay, so because of his radical ideas, bahut zyada he was writing against the king and everybody. So that's why he became stateless. He was thrown out of the state. Okay, next is the famous works, the very famous works. You can quote it, you have to quote it, and you must quote it. Okay, you must quote these names because it is very important. The famous work of Das Kapital. Okay, the very famous work of Das Kapital, you must quote it. Okay, in that, whenever a question comes, write it that his famous work were Das Kapital and Communist Manifesto. Okay, Das Kapital and Communist Manifesto were one of some of the very famous work by Karl Marx. In fact, in Das Kapital, he talked about he talked about that how society is divided into two classes. Okay, how the society divided into two classes. Society divided into two classes, basically haves and haves not. Okay, haves and haves not. Okay, haves were basically the you can say the capitalist, and they were the basically proletariat. I'll keep using this word again and again. Proletariat is basically the working class people, okay, who were working in the factories. Okay, capitalists were also called bourgeoisie class, BOUEGEOISC, bourgeoisie class. Okay, bourgeoisie class. Okay, so capitalists or the bourgeoisie class who actually owns all the everything. They own the land, they own the factories, everything. Okay, they even own the final product that was produced by the working class. Everything they were owned by the capitalists, and proletariat were only giving providing their labor, or labor ke liye they were paid wages. Okay, so that is why society was divided into two class, haves and haves not. Okay, and what happened that in the process the proletariats, the working class, were exploited by the bourgeoisie class or the capitalist class, because the capitalist class wanted to their main aim is to have maximum surplus, maximum, you can say maximum profit. To maximize profit, they used to give low wages to the proletariats, okay, at the same time not only giving low wages but also making them work for a longer period of time, like 18 घंटे काम कर रहे हैं, 20 घंटे काम कर रहे हैं, okay, like that, okay. So all those things you should write, okay. So Communist Manifesto, Das Kapital, you should always include, okay, whenever you have the chance. Try to quote it in your answer, okay. So now let's move on to the next slide. The social historical condition prevalent during that era, okay. That era, what was the era? That was early 19th century, right? Because he was born in 1818, okay. He was born in 1818. So first is earlier Enlightenment phase and French Revolution, okay. So agar if you have looked into the very first lecture, okay, very first lecture, I have talked about at length, okay, that what is Enlightenment, okay. Various views were given by the intellectuals, okay, various views were given by the philosophers, okay. There was people actually wanted to they were exposed to very radical and new ideas, okay. So all those new ideas caught the imagination of the society, okay, caught the imagination of the society. And also the French Revolution, which talks about liberty, equality, fraternity, okay. So all this Enlightenment phase, okay, where earlier everybody was not too much active, too much active in the sense that whatever society, whatever earlier religion was very much dominant. So whatever religious leaders were saying, the people, common people, were actually accepting it as it is, okay. So Enlightenment phase occur where people talk about freedom, people talk about a right to choose their own government, okay. There was so much of industrial revolution was going on, there was scientific revolution going on, there was a kind of a thing that humans can be humans are not made by the god, but humans are actually descendant of apes. And all those things change the whole conception of the people, okay. Whatever they're thinking, it changed their whole thinking process, okay. Plus French Revolution, because it gave the idea, it gave the slogan of liberty, equality, fraternity, that everybody, like king is not, should not have the sole power. All the people in the society are should enjoy the value of equality, freedom, okay, all those things. So they all caught the imagination or influenced Marx a lot, okay. If you want to look into Enlightenment phase and French Revolution, you can go and look into lecture 1, because that I've already covered in lots and lots of detail in lecture 1 itself, okay. Next is Industrial Revolution. Again, in Industrial Revolution, I have covered it again in lecture 1. In Industrial Revolution, what happened? There was a mass production. There was a mass production of products. There was a mass production of products. You can say it was a factory-based production, like factory-based production, right? Factory-based production. And as a result, people from different areas, okay, different areas, what happened? They come to a single place where the factories were located, okay. And as a result, they started working under single roof, okay. Workers first time started working under single roof, okay. They first time started working under single roof. So what happened, there was lots and lots of exploitation by the capitalist class of the working class, okay, that I've already discussed in lecture 1, okay. Why? Because in capitalist class, in capitalist capitalist economy, the basic aim was to make sure that to maximize profit. So the working the working condition of the people who were actually working, the working class. Okay, what happened, they were living in a very distressful conditions. They were treated like an animal only. Okay, unki conditions bahut kharab thi working class ki. Okay, like workers like me. Okay, so the people who are working in a factory, their conditions were very very bad. As a result, just like I'll say, the working conditions were very bad. They're working for long hours. They was working for long hours, low wages. Okay, even the living conditions was very pathetic. Okay, the living conditions were very pathetic, the living conditions. Okay, so as the living conditions were very pathetic, okay, so what happened, it all influenced or moved too much Karl Marx. Okay, that what he saw, that because when industries were set up, he actually saw that how the working class people, the major chunk of the society, are exploited by the capitalist class who own everything, right from land, labor, capital, okay, everything, factories they were owning, and their basic motive was to maximize profit. So Karl Marx was very much moved by the conditions of the working class. Okay, he was very much moved by the conditions of the working class. Okay, next is capitalist mode of production. Okay, this is almost same as industrial revolution, whatever I said here. Okay, because in capitalist mode of production, what happened, that the basic idea is to make sure that to maximize profit, right? To maximize profit, because all the means of production like land, labor, capital, they were privately owned. They were privately owned, right? They were privately owned by the capitalist, maybe a capitalist, maybe a group of capitalists or individual capitalists. So they were privately owned. Okay, so what happened is that all those things moved the Karl Marx. Okay, it shaped his it actually made him so much have develop an empathetic attitude. Okay, Karl Marx developed an empathetic attitude. He was so much moved by the pitiful condition of the working class, that he wanted to change the society. Okay, he wanted to change the society, especially the condition of the working class who were continuously exploited by the capitalist class. Okay, so this was all the social historical conditions that were prevalent that point of time. Okay, very simple, I guess. Okay, and moreover, all those things I've already explained it in lot of detail, especially the Enlightenment part, also the Industrial Revolution part. You can just go and have a look at lecture 1. Lecture 1 में आपको ये सब मिल जाएगा, ठीक है? So I'm not going into that much of deep with all the years, वो सब mention नहीं कर रहा हूँ मैं, because this is not needed. Okay, next is, let's start with the intellectual influences. Okay, see, here is the caution that I'm going to teach, because I'm going to teach whatever is necessary. Okay, I am not going to do in that much of detail, because that is not required. हमारा मकसद सिर्फ ये है कि we are able to tackle any kind of a question that comes in the UPSC. We are not here to do any kind of a thesis or something of that sort. Okay, so our focus is to make sure that we have sufficient content to tackle any kind of a question. At the same time, we have to make a very proper balance, that we don't go too much deep. Okay, because too much of depth or in-depth analysis is not required. Okay, so now let's look into the intellectual influences. Okay, in intellectual influences, first we'll talk about Ludwig Feuerbach. Okay, Ludwig Feuerbach. So here what happens, that Ludwig Feuerbach was a very renowned German philosopher, Okay, he basically he says, he actually you can say that he actually tried to understand society through materialistic interpretation. Okay, through materialistic interpretation, he wanted to understand the society. Okay, through materialistic interpretation, he wanted to understand the society. understand the society. Materialistic means economic factors, okay, economic factors in a very simple language, materialistic. So Karl Marx borrowed this concept of, you know, materialistic interpretation, okay. So that's how he borrowed the concept of materialistic interpretation from Ludwig Feuerbach. One more thing I'll, you know, tell you, this Feuerbach actually was a great German philosopher. He also talked about, you know, religion, okay, and he says that, you know, it is the man who created God. It is a man who created God, okay, very simple language. Man ने ही God को बनाया है, God ने man को नहीं बनाया है. And man has, you know, man has ascribed certain ideal qualities, okay. Man has given or ascribed certain ideal qualities to God, okay. And man tries to be, you know, God because he want to achieve those ideal qualities, which is not possible, okay, which is not possible. And in the process, okay, whatever qualities human possess, okay, whatever qualities human possess, okay, humans, they don't appreciate those qualities. They don't appreciate those qualities, okay. Just like मैन ने गॉड को बनाया, एंड गॉड को इसलिए बनाया बिकॉज उसको सर्टेन आइडियल क्वालिटीज दी. जस्ट लाइक वी से दैट अ पर्सन इज आइडियल, बट नो बडी कैन बी आइडियल, राइट. तो when we ascribe certain ideal qualities to humans, what happens? As a human, we try to achieve those ideal qualities, but that is not possible, okay. So in the process of achieving those ideal qualities, we fail to appreciate qualities of man, you know, we fail to appreciate the qualities that human possess, okay. And as a result, what happened? It leads to, I'll use the word, religious alienation. Okay, I'll come to this word alienation. Alienation means you are separated from, okay. I'll give you a very brief idea, in the sense that suppose workers is working, okay, and in the capitalist mode of production there is so much of exploitation because worker is only working for the wages. So he get detached from the whole social production process. He not only get detached from the whole social production process, but also from himself or herself, okay. So all of a sudden he becomes very alone kind of a thing, okay. He or she finds no meaning in the life, okay. Everything is alienated, okay. Everything is alienated, okay. I'll again talk about this alienation in very detailed manner when I'll talk about alienation, okay, in the Karl Marx itself. So what happened here when he talked about religious alienation, that is Ludwig Feuerbach, he actually, you know, it was criticized by Marx. It was criticized by Marx because Marx said that Feuerbach, you know, laid emphasis on material basis of religion, okay. Marx there says that, you know, the focus of Feuerbach or Ludwig Feuerbach, okay, Ludwig Feuerbach was on material basis, economic factors, but the real focus should be on the social and the economic activity, okay. How they indulge in the social relationship, what kind of economic activity they indulge into. So that will only should lead to, you know, the religious alienation should be explained in terms of not material basis, but on the basis of, I'll just tell you, but on the basis of social and economic activity, okay, social and economic activity, okay. So that's how he draw the, you know, concepts of materialistic interpretation of society from Ludwig Feuerbach. Plus he also, you know, though it is not related here, but when we talk about religion and alienation, we will use this concept that he criticizes that, you know, Feuerbach actually talks about, you know, that he talked about religious alienation in terms of, you know, material basis. Okay, he talks about religious alienation in terms of material basis. Okay, material basis of religion. Though the alienation, religious alienation, should be talked or, you know, focused, or, you know, should be, said in terms of social and economic activity of an individual. Okay, so that will suffice. Next is the Rousseau. Okay, I talked about the Rousseau, you know, in modernity and the very first lecture, but still I'll just tell it in a very brief manner, that he talked about that all the people, okay, all the people in the society, they have the right to choose their own sovereign government, right? They have the right to choose their own sovereign government. They have the right to choose their own sovereign government. Okay, and only when they choose their own government, the real personality of a people, you know, come out. Okay, and if the real, you know, the chosen government doesn't, you know, chosen government does not, you know, holds the power at the center, the people will be, you know, kind of exploited, and their personality, true personality, will not come out in the open. Okay, so it talked about that people have the right to choose their own sovereign government. Okay, Friedrich Engel was the, you know, great time, you know, friend of Karl Marx. Okay, here he, you know, kind of wrote a book that is Condition of Working Classes. Okay, Condition of Working Classes, and through this it, you know, inspired a lot kind of Karl Marx. Karl Marx. It inspired Karl Marx because the first time he was kind of exposed to the pitiful condition of the, you know, working class people in capitalist industrial society. Okay, so this is clear. Next is George Wilhelm Hegel. Okay, George Wilhelm Hegel. Okay, he was again a very renowned philosopher. Okay, very renowned philosopher. Okay, so what happened, you know, what he said. Okay, George Wilhelm Hegel, whatever he said, because Hegel ideas in his era was very much prominent. Okay, so he was very much influenced, but at the same time he actually brought certain concepts only from the Hegel. Okay, like if I talk about the philosophy of history, this is the first. Second is science of logic. In the philosophy of history, he says that it is the idea. Okay, it is the idea which shapes the word. Okay, it is the idea which shapes the word. He also gave other terminology, spirit, but in a very simple language I'm saying, he says that it is the ideas that shapes the word. Okay, he initially used this, you know, spirit. It is the spirit that shapes the word, but nobody knows what exactly is spirit. So in a very simplified language, I'm just saying it is the spirit is same as ideas. Okay, spirit is same as ideas. And throughout the history, how the society progresses, it actually talks about, you know, that society has become more and more rational. Okay, society has become more and more rational through development of ideas. Okay, so in philosophy of history, the society has become more and more rational, more and more rational. You know, society has become more and more rational in terms of development of ideas. Development of ideas. Okay, society has become more and more rational in terms of, you know, development of ideas. Okay, and how the society, you know, evolved from one stage to another, that shows how much, you know, society has become rational. Okay, so that's what, you know, in the philosophy of history he meant. Plus he also says that, you know, any kind of, you know, you can say advances in religion. Okay, any kind of advances in religion, or any kind of advances in, you know, other, you know, other kind of a field like philosophical ideas. Okay, any kind of advancement in religion or philosophical ideas talks about overall social progress. Okay, so I'll just write, I should write here, or I'll write here, any kind of advancement in religion or philosophical ideas symbolizes the overall social progress. Overall social progress. Okay, overall social progress. Plus he also says that, you know, it is the idea that I've already written. It is the idea that shapes the word. Okay, you remember I said that it is the idea that shapes the word. Okay, just like I give you a very easy example, I'll try to explain it, that it is the idea that shapes the word. This part, it is the idea that shapes the word. Okay, and idea I'm using in a very simplistic word, idea, because it talks about spirit. Okay, so idea that shapes the word. Okay, I'll see idea that shapes the word. Shapes the word. I'll just give an example. Although he said that it is spirit which is actually shaping the reality, but in a very simplified language, it's the idea which shapes the word, which means that you can say that suppose मैंने Lamborghini देख ली. Okay, so in the sense, not this example, suppose if I say that in 1990s there was a mindless consumerism. There's a mindless consumerism, right? Everybody was consuming as much as possible, है ना. बहुत ज़्यादा लोग खरीद रहे हैं, कार खरीद रहे हैं, घर बना रहे हैं. ओके, इंडस्ट्रियल प्रोडक्शन चल रहा है, पोस्ट लिबरलाइजेशन. ओके, लिबरलाइजेशन, प्राइवेटाइजेशन, ग्लोबलाइजेशन, स्पेशली इन इंडिया. सपोज इफ आई टेक एन एग्जांपल ऑफ इंडियन सोसाइटी ओनली. So what happened? Mindless consumerism takes place. As a result, the idea came that, what about the environment? What about the sustainability? Okay, I'm just giving an idea so that you can connect, okay, with this statement. Okay, so that idea later on changed the word. Okay, how? Because that idea led to the people talk about the environment sustainability. Now we are talking about electric vehicles. Okay, now we are talking about less pollution. Now we're talking about metro. Earlier it was lots and lots of cars were there in the Delhi, but now metro has made it quite possible for people to communicate, move from one place to another place. So pollution has decreased. We are moving to CNG. We are moving to electric vehicles. Okay, to decrease the pollution. We are trying to cut less trees so that the pollution decreases. So all those things, but this whole statement was rejected by the kind of Marx, and he says that it is not the idea that shapes the word. It is basically the material condition. The material condition which he was, materialistic interpretation of society, which he borrowed it from Feuerbach. He says that in material condition, it is the material condition that shapes the ideas, not the other way around. I'll give an example, just like I was giving an example of Lamborghini. आपने Lamborghini देखी. Okay, so that is something you want to achieve. मेरे को चाहिए वो. Okay, so you will start working more and more hard, and that looking into the Lamborghini, put an idea in your mind that I want that. Okay, because you want to have a kind of gain that or you want to achieve that thing, that I want to have Lamborghini, I want to have very great mansion or something of that sort. Okay, so that's how this materialistic condition. Okay, because everything is about matter. जो आप देख रहे हैं वही आपकी आइडियाज को शेप कर रहा है. जो आप देख रहे हैं वही आपकी आइडियाज को शेप कर रहा है. ओके, आपने बहुत अच्छा घर देखा, वो आपके आइडिया को शेप करने लगा. आपने लैम्बोर्गिनी देखी, वो आपके आइडिया को शेप करने लगा. ओके, everything, all the matter is shaping your idea. Okay, so that's how you can talk about these things. Okay, philosophy of history, where he says that society, okay, advances or has it has become more and more rational over the period of time through different stages of society or different stages of history. Next, second is science of logic. Here it talks about the dialectics. Here it talks about the dialectics. I'll just remove the color so that it becomes easy. Here it talks about dialectics. What do you mean by dialectics? Now suppose two people, okay, there are two people who have two views. Maybe one view is something, one person is having one view, other person is having another view. Suppose one person is having a view on religion, other person is having yet another view on religion, and both are contradictory. Okay, both are contradictory. So what happened over the period of time, these two people will try to resolve the issue through debate and try to find out the real meaning. What exactly is the meaning of religion? What do you mean by religion? Through logical conversation. Okay, that is dialectics. Okay, very simple. I'll just again say two people holding two ideas, like one person is having idea for religion, what is religion, other person is also having another idea which is contradictory to what this person is holding, person one. So through debate, through logical you can say logical debate and logical arguments, they try to arrive at a common point, that what exactly is the true meaning of religion. That is the dialectics. Okay, now when they arrive at a common definition of religion, so that again acted as a thesis. Okay, and that thesis, when it get established, yet another definition of religion established, which is contradictory to the thesis part. Again this part is resolved through logical conversation, and again yet another definition of religion appears. So thesis is kind of a one view. Okay, again antithesis, second view, like of religion, and they both debate. Okay, they both debate, and through debate they try to arrive at the true meaning of religion, which is called synthesis. And over the period of time, what happened, this synthesis again become a thesis. Okay, again become a thesis, because yet another definition of religion appears which is contradictory to the thesis part. So again this is antithesis. Okay, this is again antithesis, and again there will be a contradiction kind of a thing, and through debate yet another synthesis will occur. So this process keeps on going. Okay, so here what happened, this whole thesis, antithesis and synthesis part was given by Hegel in terms of ideas. Like this is one idea one about any particular thing, this is second idea. Okay, this whole thesis, antithesis and synthesis, this everything talks, or basically when we say, it is called dialectics. Okay, and when you take into consideration ideas, second ideas, then the synthesis, that is the overall culmination of idea 1 and idea 2. So basically you can say third idea. Okay, so dialectics is involved, and here the ideas are taken into consideration. So this was talking about dialectical idealism, which was given by Hegel. Okay, dialectical idealism. Okay, so this was had a pronounced effect on Karl Marx thinking. Again, all the things that I've explained, okay, if you don't consider the idea part, okay, I'll just remove the ink so that you can understand everything, this thesis, antithesis, thesis, again this becomes a thesis for yet another thing, thesis, again antithesis arrives, and again synthesis happen, and again this synthesis will again turn into thesis, and this process keep on going. Okay, so what happened, this thesis, antithesis, synthesis, this is a kind of a dialectics. And when you apply idea, okay, what happened, it becomes dialectical idealism. Okay, this is the kind of a concept given by you can say that it was given by Hegel. Okay, so very simple, not much of a rocket science. Okay, you also need not go into, because you're not a philosophy student, so you need not do lot of research and all those things. This is what is required as far as sociology option is concerned. Draw this diagram, that is more than enough. Okay, whatever I've said, that is more than enough. In fact, I'll give an example also of Indian society only, so that you can understand. Okay, I'll give an example. that suppose in a Vedic period, there is a Vedic period, okay, the religion was very orthodox, right? Religion was very, very orthodox. Religious ideologies were very orthodox, okay. The caste system was followed very strictly, okay. There was lots and lots of rituals, okay, that has to be followed by people from different caste, like Brahmins has to follow lots and lots of ritual. Kshatriyas has to follow different set of rituals. For a Vaishya, there was different set of rituals. The whole society was, structured or, arranged in a hierarchy kind of a thing. There was an antithesis, because these were very much strict, rigid kind of a thing, okay. So a kind of antithesis, suppose if I take an example of Buddhism, which talks about tolerance, which talks about, kind of say maybe an ideology of vegetarianism, okay. So this kind of a thing with this idea and second idea, okay, or this ideology and second ideology, okay, over the period of time they lead to, the present form of Hinduism, which has become more and more liberal, okay, more and more tolerant, and though rituals are there, but they have been restricted to the private sphere of person, okay, restricted to private sphere of person. So now Hinduism has become more and more liberal, not that much orthodox, okay, more and more tolerant, okay. So this kind of a thing you can actually imagine, okay. Even you can come up with more and more examples so that you can connect, okay. Next is historical materialism or dialectical materialism, okay. Historical materialism and dialectical materialism. Now I'll tell you what is dialectical materialism, what is historical materialism, but before that I want you to tell that this was the a kind of a theory propounded by Karl Marx. I'll tell you, but let's look into what exactly are the basic assumptions, okay. What are the basic assumptions that led to the formation of historical materialism or dialectical materialism, okay. Historical materialism or dialectical materialism. So first one is, Karl Marx considered society as an interrelated whole, okay. Karl Marx considered society as an interrelated whole, which means that various institutions, okay, all the beliefs and practices, they are all interrelated, okay. All the beliefs, practices, various social institutions, they are interrelated, okay. So as they are interrelated, he studied these interrelationship rather than treating them separately, okay. So he means Marx, okay. So all these social institutions, beliefs, that forms a part of a kind of a culture only, beliefs, practices, okay, they are all interrelated, right? They are all interrelated, and when they are interrelated, what happens? Marx studied all these interrelationship and did not studied any institution or beliefs or practices in isolations, isolation, okay. Just like various social institutions like religion, marriage, family. So all these things were studied by the Karl Marx in their entirety, because he was giving lot of consideration to the interrelationship that exists, okay. He was giving lot of consideration to the interrelationship, because all these things, social institutions, beliefs, practice, they're all interrelated, and he was not studying any social institution in the vacuum, okay, in isolation. Just like he was not studying family in only family or only marriage or only educational institution, because they were all related, okay. Next is changeable nature of society, okay. Changeable nature of society, which means that society basically continuously changes, okay. Society continuously changes because of maybe internal factors, okay. So society continuously changes. There's a continuous change in the society. Society is not static, and society continuously changes because of internal contradiction and conflicts. Okay, various contradiction and conflicts occur in the society. Like suppose two classes are there, and once one class owns the means of production, other class don't. Maybe you can say in a very simple language that there's a bourgeoisie class, there's a working class, and there's an internal contradiction. Okay, because their interests were not matching with each other. So as a result, there will be a revolution and the whole society will change. Okay, the political system, the economic system, the legal, the religious, the family, marriage, all systems will have will have a pronounced change. Okay, so society continuously changes because of due to internal conflict and contradictions. I'm sorry for my writing is not that good because of continuous because of internal conflict and contradiction. And as a result, if Marx said, if such changes are observed over a long period of time, okay, how the society is changing. So if such kind of a changes are observed over a long period of time, so what happened, it shows a sufficient degree of regularity. Okay, so if such changes are observed, okay, over a long period of time, so what happened, you can actually identify certain patterns. Okay, you can identify certain patterns that how they are changing. Okay, you can identify certain pattern that how the changes are being occurring. Okay, so you can identify certain pattern that how the changes are being occurring, and you can see that there is a sufficient degree of regularity. Okay, you can see sufficient degree of regularity that how the changes are occurring, and over a period of time you can make a general statement. That how the changes are occurring, or you can arrive at generalization, right? Like if you look into the family, earlier the family was joint family, then during the feudal also the joint family, then during the capitalist system it became a very nuclear family, then in the modern era what happened, it's a nuclear extended family. So how the family is changing. So if you continuously observe those continuously observe that how the society is changing over a long period of time, so you can arrive at can identify certain patterns, and those patterns can help you arrive at generalization. Okay, very simple. Okay, next is human nature and social relation. Now what does that supposed to mean, human nature and social relationship? Human nature, you can say that Marx said that you can say you can say that overall humans, there is no persistent, or there is no permanent nature of human. Okay, you can say that there is no persistence in human nature. Okay, there is no persistence in human nature. In fact, if I'll tell you like what's the meaning of this, it means that humans are neither originally evil nor they're originally good. Okay, humans are neither originally evil nor originally good, okay, which means that he said further that human nature is potentially revolutionary. Okay, human nature is potentially revolutionary. Okay, human nature is potentially, I'll just take it from here, human nature is potentially revolutionary. Okay, potentially revolutionary. Now what does that supposed to mean? Now suppose, you can say they have the power to rebel against the circumstances. They have the power to rebel against the circumstances, because suppose, when they enter into a kind of a production process, when they take part in the production process which is social in nature, because production doesn't take place. Suppose you're making cycle, you cannot simply go and make a cycle. There may be 10 or 20 people who will be taking part in making cycle. Somebody will be making the tires, somebody will be making the handle, somebody will be giving giving a shape to the steel, so that the whole framework is ready for the cycle. So what happened, it's a continuous social production. Okay, it's a social kind of a activity where under which the production process occur. So what happened, that if the social production is occurring, okay, they get into social relationship, and if they get to know, or they develop an awareness that they're being exploited. Okay, they develop an awareness through social production process, which is social production process. I'll just write it in a more proper manner. Just a minute. In a social production process, social because people are coming and interacting with each other, so it's a social production process. So what happened, when they get aware, or develop an awareness that they are being exploited, when they get aware that they're being exploited, so they can rise in, they can revolt. Okay, they can revolt, because they're revolting because they feel that they are being exploited. So these this revolt is actually based on class struggle. And class struggle, why? Because workers have different class and bourgeoisie belongs to different class. Okay, workers belong to different class and bourgeoisie belongs to different class. So basically it's a class struggle. It is manifested in terms of class struggle. So you will say, sir, what is class? So in a very simple language, I'll say that basically class group is, it's a group of people who share same relationship with the means of production. Okay, who share the same relationship with the means of production. Okay, in a very simple language, class is a group of people. It is a group of people who share same relationship, with means of production, and they also share the same consciousness that they have a same interest. Okay, they also share the same consciousness or similar consciousness regarding the common interest. Okay, so they are a group of people who share same relationship with the means of production, but they also share the similar consciousness, okay, that they have the same interest. Okay, so very easy. What is class? I've talked about what are the basic assumptions before we look into what exactly is historical materialism or dialectical materialism. Okay, so I think it's very easy. Now let's move on to the next slide. Now overall, let's look into the historical materialism and dialectical materialism. Okay, so I already talked about what is dialectics. Okay, what is dialectics? So when two people come together who are holding different views, and through they want to find that what is the true meaning of any particular thing, like religion. So through reasoned arguments, they try to find out a true meaning of you can say religion. Okay, so that is dialectics. Okay, there's a thesis, then there's an antithesis, and there's a synthesis. This is dialectics, right? This is dialectics. This was borrowed by the Hegel, the great German philosopher. Okay, but what is dialectical materialism, which is similar to historical materialism? Here he talked about ideas. Remember, the Hegel talked about ideas, but here you know, Karl Marx developed his own, concept called dialectical materialism. Unlike Hegel, who talked about dialectical idealism, he used idealism. Okay, so he said it is not dialectical idealism, but it is dialectical materialism. Okay, that it is the matter. Okay, it is the matter which you can say like this is a pen, matter. Okay, it is the matter, which leads to the progression of the society. Okay, which leads to the progression of the society. Okay, I'll explain it in a more detail when we move further. So dialectical materialism means that society is progressing in terms of material, materialistic factors or economic factors. Okay, or you can say there's a materialistic interpretation of society. There's a materialistic interpretation of society. There's a materialistic interpretation of society. Okay, there's a materialistic interpretation of society. The society is evolving, but society is evolving in terms of materialistic interpretation of society. Okay, so dialectics is continuously going on between the materialistic factors. Okay, so that's why dialectical materialism, and plus it is also known as historical materialism. Okay, historical because society is moving from one part to another part. Okay, society is moving from one part to another part, or throughout the history, society is moving from one epoch to another epoch, or one part to another part throughout the historical approach. Okay, society is moving from one part to another part, or moving from one phase to another phase, just like Marx said that feudal to communalism, feudal to capitalist, to socialist. Okay, in terms of there's a dialectics work going on. There's a dialectic works going on. I'll talk about dialectics, what are the law of dialectics, I'll talk about in a lot more detail. Just wait for few slides. So here the dialectics is working on, and plus material factors are there, or you can say economic factors are there. Okay, I'll explain it. What is economic factors? Economic factors are there, which is making sure that the society moves from feudal to capitalist to socialist. That is why dialectical materialism, dialectics, because there's a continuous thesis, antithesis, then synthesis, plus we are taking into consideration economic factors. And again, if you use some other word, historical materialism. Historical because throughout the historical approach, society is moving from one stage to another stage, like feudalistic to capitalist to socialist, or next stage is communist. And materialistic because you want to try to understand the society, or try to interpret the society in terms of materialistic factors or economic factors. Okay, so it's very, very simple. Okay, when I'll give you the example later, you will be able to connect it very easily. Okay, so now let's look into the basic definitions. Okay, basic definition that the historical materialism, okay, I'm sorry, yes, so the historical materialism or dialectical materialism is the Marxian theory. Okay, it's a Marxian theory that seeks to explain everything in terms of change, how the change is occurring in the society, which is caused due to the constraint, okay, constraint coordination of mutually opposite forces, okay, mutually opposite forces due to constraint coordination, contradiction of mutually opposite forces found in nature. Okay, so I'll give you more and more examples so that you can appreciate the fact that why it is dialectical materialism, how it is working and everything. Okay, don't worry, everything will fall in place, okay, as we move further in the slide. Okay, next is that historical materialism, because the question has already been asked earlier, before 2014, that what are the salient features, what are the salient features of historical materialism. Okay, so I've already given you the very basic definition of historical materialism. I've talked about the dialectics, thesis, antithesis, then synthesis. Okay, that was brought, that was the concept was borrowed by the Hegel. Okay, now let's look into the basic more detail, or you can say the features Okay, these are the features of historical materialism or dialectical materialism, that social relations are over and above individuals. Okay, social relations are over and above individual. Now it means that to produce basic necessities of life, okay, to produce basic necessities of life, the people enter into a social relationship. Okay, people enter into a social relationship, maybe voluntarily or involuntarily. Okay, they enter into a social relationship, voluntary, involuntary, and as a result, okay, that social relationship, because they enter into the social relationship involuntarily, so that is why it is over and above the individual. Okay, so to produce basic necessities of life, to produce basic necessities of life, okay, to produce basic necessities of life, just a minute, to produce basic necessities of life, people enter into social relationship involuntarily. Okay, by birth or involuntarily. Okay, so as a result, they don't have any choice, they enter into a social relationship. Suppose they are born into a person is born into a poor family, so what happened, they have no choice, they have to enter into a kind of a process where they also earn for the family. Maybe they work in the factory where they enter into a social relationship, so by birth also. And involuntarily, because maybe a person is become very poor, the whole family is very poor. Okay, so what happens, they have no other choice but to work in the or take part in the production, so that they can earn certain wages. Okay, so that is why enter into social relationship by birth or involuntarily. So that is why the social relationship is over and above individual. There's a very basic features that you should understand. Okay, so what happened, these relations impinge upon individual irrespective of their preferences. Okay, which means that the relationship, okay, all the relationship, the social relationship in which they enter, okay, they are actually forced upon them, or not even you can say force, but they impinge. Okay, it actually just come over them, irrespective of their preferences, irrespective of their preferences. Okay, irrespective of their preferences. Okay, so I think when you say social relation over and above individual, that itself will suffice, and you can give an example. Next is infrastructure and superstructure. Okay, so this is very interesting. Okay, because you can just draw the diagram that I have driven here. Okay, just you can simply draw the diagram. It means that every society is divided into two parts. Okay, infrastructure and the superstructure. Okay, infrastructure and superstructure. See, this is infrastructure. Okay, infrastructure. Now you will be able to connect dialectical materialism or historical materialism. Okay, infrastructure, okay, which is basically kind of economic factors or materialistic factors, and it has means of productions. I'll talk about means of production, what is means of production, everything. And it has relation of production. Okay, relation of production, which means means are tools, machines, factories, land, raw materials. You can use this PPT later as a PDF, and then you can see, okay, maybe if it's not visible to you. And relation of production means like relation between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, relation between the workers and the workers. Okay, and these also concept of private property, commodities, bourgeoisie, petty bourgeoisie, capital, everything. Okay, so this is all basic economic factors. Okay, economic factors. And what are the superstructures? Superstructures are basically everything else apart from economic factors. Okay, everything else apart from economic factors. Okay, so art, family, culture, religion, philosophy, law, media, politics, science, education, ideology, everything forms a part of superstructure. Okay, and here what happened, this infrastructure has a lot of significance. The infrastructure has lots and lots of significance. Why? Because the social relationship, they are defined in terms of, you know, economic factors. The social relationships, okay, the social relationship between individuals, the social relationship between people is determined by economic factors, and this economic factors is basically this one, the infrastructure, which contains basically the means of production, the forces of production, and everything. Okay, so that is why it is given a lot of, you know, importance, and this in turn actually shapes and maintains the superstructure. This in turn, you know, shapes and maintains the superstructure. Whatever happens here, it will have an automatic repercussion on this part, the, you know, the superstructure. See, the line is also given. This moves in a spiral pattern. The base is generally dominant. Okay, though both, you know, interact and shapes each other, but the base is generally dominant. Okay, which means this part is have lot of dominance over the superstructure part. Okay, so as I said, social relationship is basically, you know, the social relationship between people is determined by the economic factors. Economic factors means the, you know, the infrastructure. Okay, so very simple. And you know, any change in the internal condition, okay, any change in the internal condition or the social relation, you know, is being determined by the economic factors. Okay, any change in the social relation, okay, any change that occur in the, any change in social relation, any change in the social relation is because of the economic factors. I'll talk about all these things, the relation of production, or you know, the forces of production. I'll talk about everything in detail. Okay, now forces and relation of production. See, this terminology is again come, forces and the relation of production. Now what does forces and relation of production come means? Forces and relation of production. Now forces of production means that, you know, degree to which human being control nature. Okay, it is the degree to which human being control the nature. Okay, I'll write it. This forces of production, or I'll just mention it like FOP. Forces of production means the degree to which, you know, human beings control the nature. Degree to which human beings control the nature, and there are various ways through which they control the nature. Like it has means through which, you know, material goods are produced, or you know, the basic necessities of lives, or not even basic necessities, other material goods are produced. Okay, so it has means through which material goods are produced, right? Material goods are produced. Okay, very simple. Now I'll say, what are the means? Okay, what are the means? So, you know, means basically, you know, means, you know, tools, machinery, equipment, okay, all those things, technology. Okay, so means basically means, you know, means here implies, you know, tools, techniques, right, technology, right, tools, techniques, technology, equipments, even, you know, skills and education of the worker, that also forms a part. Skills and education of workers, even, you know, inanimate sources of energy, inanimate sources of energy like wind, water, sources of energy, that also forms a part of, you know, means. Okay, or forms a part of forces of production. Okay, so I think that is very clear what is forces of production. Like, you know, whatever you have at your disposable, you know, which you can use it to manipulate the nature so that you can make certain products. Okay, it can be something basic necessities of life, जैसे कि आपके पास टेक्नोलॉजी बहुत अच्छी है, आपके पास बहुत अच्छा वुड कटर है, आपने ट्री को काट दिया एंड यू मेड अ चेयर आउट ऑफ इट. Okay, so earlier it was axe, you kept on doing it, it will take lots of hours. Now you have a wood cutter, proper mechanized wood cutter, उससे आप लॉक्स काट रहे हैं, लॉक्स बना के आप प्रॉपर कारपेंटर है, you have all the nails and hammer and everything, and you very quickly make a chair out of it. Okay, so these are the kind of tools and techniques, equipments, technology. Even आदमी का स्किल कैसा है, okay, whether he can do things fast or not, all those things, education level कैसा है, okay, all those things come as a forces of production. Okay, now what is the relation of production? Relation of production is very, very easy. Okay, relation of production basically means that you can say that when the people indulge in some kind of a production process, okay, that is not social. Okay, sorry, that is not the production doesn't take place in isolation. In fact, that production is a social production process. Okay, that I mentioned earlier, that whole production process is social in nature, which means that relation of production is social in nature, or the whole, I'll say not relation, the whole production process is social in nature, but relation of production, okay, social in nature, the whole production process is social in nature, because people are coming together under a single factory. आप एक ही फैक्ट्री में आ रहे हैं, आप प्रोडक्शन प्रोसेस में पार्ट ले रहे हैं, लेके आप साइकिल बना रहे हैं, कुछ लोग टायर बना रहे हैं, कुछ लोग उसकी चेन बना रहे हैं, कुछ लोग एल्युमिनियम को मतलब एल्युमिनियम उसका फ्रेम बना रहे हैं, कुछ लोग उसकी घंटी बना रहे हैं, ओके, कुछ लोग उसका कैरियल बना रहे हैं. सो ऑल दोज थिंग्स है ना. So in the process of making a cycle, you are interacting with each other. So that's why the whole production process is social in nature. Now the relation of production means that suppose there's a business people, there's a business class people, or the capitalist. Okay, he owns all the means of production, all the forces of production. He owns technology, he owns all the tools, techniques, everything. Okay, like मालिक जिसके पास सब कुछ है, उसके पास मशीन भी है, उसके पास लैंड भी है, कैपिटल भी है, फैक्ट्री भी है. ओके, एंड दिस अ वर्किंग क्लास पीपल. सो व्हाट हैपन, दिस रिलेशन ऑफ प्रोडक्शन बिटवीन द वर्किंग क्लास एंड द बॉस इज ऑफ डोमिनेशन and subordination, right? Domination and subordination, right? But the relation of production between worker and worker will be what? Cooperation and coordination. Cooperation and coordination. So what kind of a relation of production is there between worker and the boss and the worker and the worker? Okay, because worker and worker belong to the same class, same group. Okay, so that is why this is called the relation of production. Okay, what this is called? Relation of production. Okay, now I think I've explained you the basic or the features. Okay, next now move further to look into more features. Social change in terms of social classes. Okay, social change in terms of social classes. Now what does it mean, social change in terms of social classes? No, I have talked about classes in detail. Okay, that class is the group of people who share a same kind of a relationship with the means of production, right? Plus they also have understanding or kind of a same consciousness that they have the same interest, right? So it's a group of people having same relationship with the means of production, plus they also recognize the fact that they have a same interest. So that's why classes. Okay, so social change in terms of social classes. Now what does it mean, social change in terms of social classes? Which means that overall how social change takes place. Okay, overall how social change takes place, how the society has been changing. Okay, I'll just write overall how social change takes place. Like earlier it was a simple society, there was no classes. Suppose if you say that primitive communism, there was no classes. Now through successive changes we come to the capitalist class, the capitalist system. capitalist society, in fact capitalist society, here the contradiction occur between the people who are working class, right, working class plus the capitalist class, okay, working class as well as the capitalist class. So the contradiction occur and the resolution occurs, and the contradiction occurs. As a result, the revolution happens because both their interests here are contradictory in nature. This results in a social change. Overall, the whole society changes. Whole society changes. Like these are assurance of, you can say socialistic system, socialistic, mode of production, or you can say communist mode of production. So this is how social change in terms of social classes, because working people and the capitalist people, they have both different classes, because they have different relation with respect to the means of production. Working class have no ownership with as far as means of production is concerned. They don't own land, labor, capital, or everything, while capitalists actually own everything, plus they want to maximize profit, and in the meantime they want to make sure that working class people keep working for them at the very lowest wage. That's why their interest is completely completely different. As a result, the revolution occur because the working class people they revolt against the capitalist class. As a result, the social change occur and the assurance of a new social order, that is socialist mode of production, occurs. Okay, so that's how the social change in terms of social class occurs. Okay, very simple. Next is dialectical relationship between the forces and the relation of production. Okay, dialectical relationship between the forces and the relation of production. Now this is very, very important, okay, because I have already talked about you that what is forces of production, what is relation of production. Now I'll give you a very good example. Okay, try to understand it. I have talked about you the forces of production is basically talks about tools, equipments, right, tools, equipments, technology, right, tools, equipments, technology, and etc. What is the relation of production? Like how the people who own the forces of production and everything, how the relation is occurring between working class and the boss, and the working class and the boss, okay, or the working class and the working class. Now very simple example I'll take. Suppose I am taking the very first kind of a society, that is primitive communism. Primitive communism. So how the dialectics works? Okay, here in primitive communism, everything is all the production is community based. There is no class, right? All the production, everybody is coordinating, everybody is cooperating, there's a mutual assistance. Okay, there's a mutual assistance, everybody is coordinating, and mutual assistance is there. Plus what happens is that the tools are also very primitive. Okay, everything is community based, like production is community based, and all the resources are owned by the community. Resources owned by community, right? There is no private ownership. Okay, and the tools are very primitive, which means the tools which symbolizes the forces of production, like primitive, like bow and arrow, sticks. Okay, sticks. So just a minute. So forces of production in primitive communism is bow and arrow, very primitive, right? Bow and arrow, or you can say sticks. And the relation of production was very everything is cooperation, coordination, right? Cooperation and coordination. Everybody is equal, so there is no boss, right? Everybody is equal. There's no boss, there's no society, there's no class, everybody is equal. Okay, tools are very primitive. Okay, so what happened over the period of time? over the period of time, what happened, these forces of production becomes technically advanced, right? This becomes technically advanced, right? This becomes technically advanced in the sense like tools may be, they may discover tools maybe of, metal tools may be discovered. So as a result, the productivity increased. With the invention of fire and everything, the village kind of a thing established. Okay, plus productivity increased, tools maybe, metal tools are discovered. Plus, as the productivity increased, what happens is that, this community, the surplus is generated, right? The surplus is generated. Earlier it was only subsistence level, so surplus is generated. So what happened, this community based organization, okay, this community based organization is broken into, family based, okay, because first time the private ownership occurs, okay, private ownership occurs because they actually lay control over the various forces of production. They lay, they have a control, they lay control of the forces of production, like good metal tools or good bow and arrow, good axe or something of that sort. Okay, so as a result, there is a contradiction between the forces of production, okay, forces of production and the relation of production, okay, forces of production which are more technically advanced now, right, and relation of production which was earlier, community based, but with technically advanced force of production, it requires, a kind of new relation of production, because now one family is, private property has come into existence, so family is owning the force of production, so they want somebody, some people are less equal than others, okay, some people are, at a higher pedestal than other, okay. As a result, what happened, the relation of production will change, like a boss will appear and the worker will appear. So this kind of a dialectics keeps on working because of the productive forces which keeps on, updating itself. So that's why the dialectical relation between the forces and the relation of production, okay, this results into the throw of primitive communism kind of a society, okay, because there's a clash. One is trying to hold back the community based, community kind of a life, community society. The old and some section of the society want to hold back to the community based production or something of that sort, and other people who now owns the forces of production wants to change to new order, right? So first section is trying to hold back, other section trying to move forward, right? So as a result, the contradiction occurs, and over the period of time, what happened, there's a throwback, or there's a throw off, primitive communist society and the slave form of society occur, right? So that is why the dialectical relationship, okay, both are continuously influencing each other, okay, especially the force of production is related to, as the product production is changing, it is changing the relation of production as well, okay. So that's why the dialectical relation between the forces and the relation of production, okay. Next is social reality and consciousness, okay. Now this is also very good concept, social reality and the consciousness, okay, very good concept, you need to understand, okay. Here we means that it is the social reality that determines the human consciousness, okay. It is the social reality that determines the human consciousness, social reality that determines the human consciousness, okay. So it is a social reality, that determines the human consciousness. In fact, if you see that, what is the reality in, suppose if I take an example of capitalist mode of production in capitalist society, in the capitalist society, okay, in the capitalist society there are two kind of classes, okay, which is bourgeoisie class or the capitalist class and the proletariat who are the working class, right? Okay, so I'm using two terminologies, okay. I'll use certain terminologies and I'll explain it also to you because 10 marker question may be asked. But before that, what happened in the capitalist society, a kind of false consciousness is developed. False consciousness exists. False consciousness is, exist. False consciousness exists, or a kind of, you can say, a kind of a false narrative which is propagated by the capitalist class, which means that everything is fair. Everything is fair. Everything is fair in capitalist society. Equality exists. Equality exists. Workers are being said that you are being paid wages. Workers are said that you are being paid wages. And all those things, okay. So false consciousness is there, okay. Plus they are giving legal protection, education, okay. They are giving legal protection, all the people, working class, they're giving legal protection. They are provided with education because the wages are being paid. Plus apart from that, all the workers are free, okay. All the workers are free, unlike in slave society where the slaves were continuously under the domination of their masters, or in the serfs also, feudal society where the serfs were attached to the land and they were continuously under the protection of their feudal lords. So workers are free, they can go anywhere they want, they can work anywhere they want. But this is false consciousness, okay. This is a false narrative. The real narrative is something different, which means that there's a high degree of inequality, there's a high degree of exploitation, right? There's a high degree of exploitation, okay. And since there's a high degree of exploitation, what happened? We say that workers are free, okay, but the fact of the matter is that even workers are exploited everywhere. Workers are exploited everywhere. Because the basic aim of capitalist society is to make sure that to extract as much profit as possible, okay. So they treat workers as if they are not some kind of human being, but make sure that they give them as much profit as possible, okay. That is the basic essence. Plus all the means of productions are privately owned by the capitalist. So what happened? The workers are exploited everywhere. Like even if they leave one capitalist, even if they go out of one industry and go to another industry, there also the capitalist will be ruling that industry, who will be the owner of that industry. He will again be exploiting that worker, the same worker again. So what happened? There's a high degree of inequality, high degree of exploitation, okay. Workers are exploited everywhere, okay. There's no proper equality exist, okay. So what happened is that I'm using two terms, please be very careful. I'm using two terms, class for itself, okay, and class for itself, and you can say class in itself, okay. Class for itself and class in itself, okay. Class in itself, class in itself, class for itself and class in itself. So what happened that earlier, because of false consciousness, okay, people are accepting, okay, workers are accepting the fact that whatever is happening, it is justified, okay, kind of a karma theory, okay, whatever is happening is justified, I am being paid for my wages, that's it, I'm okay, I'm very happy, जो भी हो रहा है बहुत अच्छा हो रहा है, मेरे को मेरे काम के पैसे मिल रहे हैं and I'm happy, ठीक है. He is not looking it beyond that, okay, कि मेरा एक्सप्लॉयटेशन हो रहा है, मुझे पैसे कम मिल रहे हैं और मैं जितना वर्थ क्रिएट कर रहा हूँ उससे कहीं ज़्यादा प्रॉफिट कैपिटलिस्ट कमा रहे हैं, okay. So this is class in itself, which is marked by false consciousness. People are not aware of the objective reality, okay. People are not aware of objective reality. people are not aware of objective reality. Okay, people are not aware of objective reality. So what happened, that when they have developed a consciousness that they are being exploited, okay, and they regroup as a class because they have the same shared interest, okay, they started revolting against the capitalist class. Okay, they started revolting as against the capitalist class. And when they develop this consciousness where they have a subjective understanding, they develop a subjective understanding of objective reality. Reality means, you know, objective means something which you can see. मेरा exploitation हो रहा है. Okay, so as a person I understand कि भाई मेरा exploitation हो रहा है. So subjective understanding of objective reality. The moment the working class develop this attitude, they revolt against the bourgeoisie or capitalist class, and then this is called class for itself. Class for itself, who have developed a consciousness, they revolt against the bourgeoisie class, okay, to basically fight for better wages, okay, fight for more concessions, fight for holidays, better working conditions. And as and when over the period of time, you know, this contradiction is resolved in terms of, you know, if they are not provided with proper solution, you know, they holistically, the whole working class, you know, they revolt against the you know, bourgeoisie class, and as a result a kind of a social revolution occur. Social revolution occur, okay, which is the next point. A social revolution occur, okay, where capitalist mode of production is replaced by socialist mode of production. Okay, we will see how the capitalist mode of production replaced socialist mode of production in the later slide also, but here I'll just give you an idea that capitalist mode of production, where the private ownership is there, the you know, the profit maximization was the main motive. In socialist mode of production, you know, everything, all the means of productions are owned by the proletariat. There is a dictatorship of proletariat, and every people is being given as per their needs. Every person is given as per their needs, okay, and there's no concept of kind of private property, there's no concept of profit maximization. Okay, so a social revolution occur. As a result, everybody, you know, becomes equal, and nobody can claim the, you know, excuse me, they claim the authority that they, you know, single-handedly own the means of production. Okay, so that's how, you know, you can say the social revolution occur. So I have given you very, you know, three terminology: false consciousness, okay, class for itself, and class in itself. Okay, try to use this in case the question comes. This will be a very kind of, you know, very easy for you. Okay, class in itself means that they are, you know, they have a false consciousness. उनको लगता है कि भाई सब कुछ ठीक है. Okay, they are not aware कि वो class है actually. They are not aware कि they can make a whole social group. Okay, जिनका एक common interest है, ये they are not aware first of all. Okay, plus उनको पता ही नहीं कि उनका exploitation हो रहा है. So that's why their class, you know, class in itself, सिर्फ class है, उनको मतलब उनको ये भी नहीं पता कि वो class है. Okay, they are part of a class, but they are not aware that they are part of class. False consciousness है, सब कुछ ठीक है, सब कुछ अच्छा है, उनको legal protection दिया है, उनको wages मिल रहा है. So bourgeoisie are creating a kind of false consciousness. जब वर्कर्स को पता लग रहा है कि वो एक्सप्लॉइट हो रहे हैं, देन दे मेक, यू नो, दे आर अवेयर दैट दे आर एक्चुअली पार्ट ऑफ क्लास हु हैव अ सिमिलर रिलेशन विद द मीन्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन, जहाँ पे वो किसी भी मीन्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन को कंट्रोल नहीं करते, वेदर इज लैंड, लेबर, कैपिटल और फाइनल प्रोडक्ट वॉट एवर. प्लस वो समझ चुके हैं कि उनका एक्सप्लॉइटेशन हो रहा है, उनको बहुत कम पैसे मिले, उनकी वर्किंग कंडीशन बहुत ही खराब है, इन ऑल दोज थिंग्स. देन दे टर्न इन टू क्लास फॉर इट सेल्फ, एंड एज अ रिजल्ट व्हेन दे टर्न इन टू क्लास फॉर इट सेल्फ, अ सोशल रिवोल्यूशन अकर बिकॉज they revolt against the bourgeoisie class, and as a result the capitalist mode of production changed to socialist mode of production, where, you know, the people, or, you know, everybody is equal, and the whole concept of private property or profit maximization completely vanished or completely demolished. Okay, so it's very clear, I guess. Okay, next is historical materialism, some more details. Okay, like if I have to say that historical materialism, you know, we have been talking about that, it is, you know, we have talked about, you know, the evolution of society in terms of, you know, evolution of society in terms of, you know, historical approach, historical epochs. Okay, है ना, कि हिस्ट्री में कैसे सोसाइटी इवॉल्व हुआ एक स्टेज से दूसरे स्टेज से तीसरी स्टेज पे. ओके, फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल. एंड वी ऑल्सो टॉक्ड अबाउट कि everything is controlled or everything is based on economic factors. Okay, but it is not completely economic determinism. It is not completely economic determinism. You have to understand the issue that, you know, when we talk about historical materialism, we have to take into account the relation of production, which is social in nature. Right? Relation of production which is social in nature. Okay, social in nature means that people are coming together, एक ही factory में आ रहे हैं. So it is not completely in terms of economic, but you also have to take into consideration कि people एक ही factory के नीचे आ रहे हैं, and the whole production process is social in nature because different people from different background are coming together and taking part in the production process. In the process they are interacting with each other, and how they interact. Suppose if I am also taking part in the production process, suppose there is an assembly line production. आपने देखा होगा चार्ली चैपलिन का ना assembly line production में where he creates a comic that how Charlie Chaplin was only tightening the screw. Okay, it was a kind of a funny situation that कितना ज़्यादा mechanization हो गया है, de-skilling of work हो गई है. एक ही बंदे को एक बहुत छोटा सा काम दे दिया गया है कि वो स्क्रू को टाइट करता रहे. Okay, so de-skilling of work is there. But still over the process, no, what happened? Everyone who is taking part of the production process in making a product, they are actually, what happens? They are interacting with each other, right? They are interacting with each other, and when they interact, their interaction is based upon their own, you know, internal meanings, motives, their own culture, their own beliefs, their own practices. Okay, so it is contingent upon their own culture, beliefs, and practices. So this should be taken into account. Okay, this should be taken into account so that we can with conviction say that, you know, historical materialism is not about economic determinism only. Okay, so I think it's very clear. Okay, and plus, you know, without getting into the, you know, without understanding the culture of working class people, because that will determine how they interact, the production process will not be only possible. Okay, so without understanding the culture of working class people, culture means, you know, their beliefs, practices, their way of living, because that will determine how they will interact with the people. Okay, how they will interact with the people. So without this understanding, the production process will not be possible. The production process will not be possible. Okay, because you need to understand how they will react and everything. Okay, what if you come across a group of people who are very much violent? Okay, you don't understand their culture, then how can you ask them to take part in the production process? It will be very difficult to manage them. Okay, simple. Next is contribution of historical materialism to sociological theory. Okay, contribution of historical materialism to sociological theory. Okay, so this type of question is also, you know, very prospective question that can come. So here the first point is that, you know, all kind of, you know, society, you know, all kind of a society could be actually understood. Okay, all kind of a society could be actually understood through historical materialism. All kind of society could be understood through historical materialism. Like we try to understand historical materialism, like, you know, capitalist society, and historical materialism, you know, because Marx gave this concept that how society moved from, you know, ancient to, you know, feudal to capitalist to then you know, socialist to communist. Okay, but communism overall has been failing. So does there is any utility in historical materialism? Yes, there is a utility, even though communism has been failing, because even Russia is moving from communism to capitalism. Okay, so still historical materialism has a lot of, you know, relevance, especially in sociological theory, because all kind of society could be easily understood through historical materialism. For that example, for that, you know, suppose I take a tribal society, okay, and I'm taking it in terms of economic factors. Now suppose the economy here is very rudimentary. Economic system is very much rudimentary, okay. Economic system is very much rudimentary. So what happened, economic factors is rudimentary. So what happened in tribal society, or in a very simple society, if I take about, everything is about mechanical solidarity, right? Everything is like about mechanical solidarity. Mechanical solidarity. They have a very basic economic system, not notes like हम लोग जैसे यहाँ पे notes use करते हैं या digital transaction करते हैं. No, maybe in the economic system they may be using some kind of a barter system. आपको मुझे कोई चीज़ ज़रूरत है, मेरे पास वो चीज़ है, और मुझे कुछ ज़रूरत है जो आपके पास है, तो we'll just exchange it. There is no money involved, right? There is no digital transaction. So very simple society. So accordingly, mechanical solidarity, because everybody is cooperating with each other, everybody is equal. So accordingly, you can say that they have a very simple religious institutions. We can say religious institutions, because इतनी ज़्यादा complexity life नहीं है, ठीक है. You can say very simple very simple political system. Okay, so all these things you can connect. Okay, so you can say that primitive society जहाँ पे economic system बहुत ही ज़्यादा simple है, बहुत ज़्यादा complex नहीं है, barter system चल रहा है ना. So accordingly उतनी ज़्यादा ज़रूरत नहीं है चीज़ों को control करने की, plus political system आपका वहाँ पे बहुत simple होगा, और religious institutions बहुत ज़्यादा simple होंगे. Okay, so all these things you can talk about. Next is it can even be very helpful in studying various social phenomena. We're studying various social phenomenon. How it can be very useful in studying social phenomenon? It can be very useful in studying social phenomena, like suppose मैं मान के चल रहा हूँ family, या suppose मैं मान के चल रहा हूँ marriage, okay, for that matter marriage. Up now family has certain history, okay, because it's historical materialism, okay. So family has certain history. So over the history what happened, suppose economic factors are there which are in a primitive community, okay. The economic factors are economic system is very rudimentary, okay. People are just producing for subsistence level. So what happened, this is a joint family. Now suppose there is a capitalist society जहाँ पे इकोनॉमिक सिस्टम बहुत ही ज़्यादा ग्रो कर गया है, इकोनॉमिक सिस्टम बहुत ज़्यादा ग्रो कर गया है, ओके. सो you can trace the history of family in terms of economic factors, okay. Like here it was joint family was the need of the hour. Here nuclear family will come into existence, because the people will be migrating to a place where place which will offer them better livelihood. So all those things could be used. Like this can be also applicable in terms of education. Earlier suppose the economic factors were not, because earlier education was more of family based, Gurukul system and everything, because the people were not that much of rich, or not much of you can say not much of aware. But if I say in terms of economic factors, suppose education कैसे कैसे evolve हुआ, okay. पहले family based था, पहले तो education की उतनी ज़रूरत भी नहीं थी, okay. फिर now over the period of time, as people gained lots and lots of money, they getting lots and lot of wealth, now they are going for foreign education. So similarly all the social phenomena could be easily understood through historical materialism, okay. So try to explore more and more phenomena. I'm just giving you fodder points, okay. So I've talked about various kind of society that you can understand, like tribal society, okay, because tribal society की अपनी एक history होती है, okay. So what you can see is that over the period of time, जैसे tribal society कैसे कैसे evolve हो रहा है, तो economic system उनका evolve होगा, and as per the economic system will evolve. Initially if the economic system is very rudimentary, or if the primitive society is very much rudimentary, तो उनका economic system भी बहुत ज़्यादा kind of weak होगा और बहुत ज़्यादा rudimentary होगा, basic होगा. सो अकॉर्डिंगली उनका ओवरऑल जो अदर इंस्टीट्यूशंस है जैसे रिलीजियस, पॉलिटिकल, ऑल दिस एजुकेशनल, दे विल बी वेरी kind of a thing, you can say very rudimentary. But as tribal society get in touch with the outer world and all, they started having money as an exchange medium. They started doing, this is just an utopian concept, I just want you to understand. So suppose over the period of time, if they indulge in digital transaction or take money, money as a way of transacting business, all those things. So what happened, उनका रिलीजियस इंस्टीट्यूशन, पॉलिटिकल इंस्टीट्यूशन भी चेंज होने शुरू कर देगा, बिकॉज इट इज द इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर विच इज चेंजिंग द पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम एंड एवरीथिंग, रिलीजियस इंस्टीट्यूशन और इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर चेंजिंग द you can say the superstructure. Yet another thing that you can say is that you have talked about Obama, you have seen Obamacare, right? Manrega. Okay, now you can again talk about like throughout history, earlier what happened, that you can say that over the period of time, okay, you can see that earlier there was not much of inequality was existence, okay, because what happened, that people were having they were having very less needs, plus over the period of time when the less needs were there, but with the population explosion, the inequality rose. Okay, inequality rose. So as the inequality rose, okay, the economic inequality actually what happens, it increases. So over the period of history, you can say that as the economic inequality increases, why the economic inequality increases? Not only because of the population growth, but also because slowly earlier what happens, that the forces of production, the means of productions were all controlled by the community. But with advancement in technology and everything, there was a growth of private property, growth of profit maximization. So some people were controlling forces of production, means of production. So as a result, the whole society got divided into separate classes, all those things. So some people who had nothing, no means of production, no forces of production at their disposal, they only can give their labor. Okay, so as a result, the inequality increases, right? So I'm just talking about how throughout history the inequality, from equality to inequality we are moving, and in terms of economic factors. Okay, I'm talking about forces of production, relation of production. So as a result, we talk about social security benefit, right? Social security benefits, like Obamacare, or you can say apart from Obamacare, you can also talk about Narega. So these are all part of you can say that how the historical materialism helps to sociological theory, like how various kind of programs could be developed by developing a holistic understanding about historical materialism. Okay, so I'm just giving you lots of fodder point. आप भी थोड़े से अपने आइडियाज लाके मतलब यूज कर सकते हैं, बट मेक श्योर दोस आइडियाज आर वेरी मच रेलेवेंट एंड फिक्स इनटू दिस कॉन्सेप्ट्स. ओके, नेक्स्ट इज द हिस्टोरिकल मटेरियलिज्म और द डायलेक्टिकल मटेरियलिज्म क्रिटिसिज्म. Okay, historical materialism, dialectical materialism, criticism. Okay, so again this can also be a kind of potential question that can be asked, but at least you should have some kind of fodder points that you should have. So first is overemphasis on material factors. Okay, which means that you can say that Karl Marx, he completely ignored the social and the cultural factors. Okay, he completely ignored the social and cultural factors, okay, which results in change. Okay, which results in change. He says that society evolved, and it evolved because of the changes in the economic factors. Okay, so he completely ignores social and cultural factors and reduces the importance of all other factors into merely economic factors. Okay, he reduces all the factors, social, cultural, simply into economic factors. Just like I'll take an example of two thinkers. Okay, this will be you can quote it like Karl Popper. I've used his name earlier also. He was a great philosopher. He talked about that Karl Marx is only talking about economic reductionism. Everything he is explaining in terms of economics only. Economic factors is the reason why the conflict occurs. Economic factor is the reason why the conflict occurs, contradiction appears, and as a result social change occurs. Okay, next is Ralph Dahrendorf. Okay, Ralph Dahrendorf. Okay, so Ralph Dahrendorf also a very pronounced sociologist. Ralph Dahrendorf. Ralph Dahrendorf, who talked about, he was a very pronounced sociologist, who talks about, you know, differential authority. Differential authority. It is not the economic factor that may lead to conflict and contradiction, ultimately leading to social change, but differential authority can also be a reason for conflict. Differential authority means, suppose I'm a person, I have certain authority, and one more person is there who has a certain degree of more authority than me. Okay, not too much, you know, not too much of difference is there, but a very little difference is there. So I may have a conflict with him over certain opinion. Okay, so that can also lead to a conflict. So that's why he talks about that differential authority can also lead to conflict and contradiction. Okay, Ralph Dahrendorf. Okay, next is conflict perspective. Okay, in conflict perspective, what happened that, you know, he's so much obsessed with the conflict that he ignored the social order only. Okay, which means that Karl Marx was so much, you know, obsessed with the conflict, so much obsessed with conflict that he ignored the social order only. Social order only. Now here one of the German sociologists, George Simmel, okay, German sociologist George Simmel, he says that even conflict has its own function. No, George Simmel, he was a German sociologist. Please, I request all of you, you know, with folded hand, make sure that you write the name of the thinkers in a very, you know, correct manner. Don't use wrong spelling. Okay, because if you use wrong spelling, you know, it will give a very, very wrong impression on the examiner. Okay, so whether it is, you know, Ralph Dahrendorf, or it is, you know, Karl Popper, or it is George Simmel, I request you to do googling also, so that you are more 100%, you know, confident that you are using the right spelling. Okay, so George Simmel, he says that even conflict has certain functions. Conflict has certain functions. Okay, conflict has certain functions. Next is macro view, which means that he was only looking at the society from a macro perspective. Okay, that how the society is changing. He's focused everything upon the micro evolutionary aspect, how the society is evolving from, you know, one part to other part to, you know, next another part. He was not looking into the, you know, micro aspects. He was completely ignoring a micro aspect. He was only concerned with the macro evolutionary aspect. Macro evolutionary aspect. Okay, he was not concerned with the micro aspect, like, you know, what are the individual meanings and motives, and how these individual meanings and motives change their social behavior, and in turn making the social change in the society, or how every person is different, so their individual meaning and motives may be different, so that may be a result into a kind of a conflict and contradiction between individuals that may lead into, you know, kind of a social change. Okay, so that was completely ignored by the Karl Marx. Okay, so now that actually, you know, I think I have talked about in a lot of detail. I have also talked about, you know, the kind of, you know, historical materialism or dialectical materialism. Even the criticism part I have also, you know, discussed. Okay, so now friends, we have already talked in detail about the historical materialism. Okay, we have talked about, you know, before historical materialism, before going to historical materialism, we talked about the social background, we talked about, you know, the personal life of Karl Marx, we talked about, you know, the you know, historical conditions that were prevalent at that point of time, intellectual influences. Then in detail we talked about, you know, historical materialism, which is same as dialectical materialism. Okay, what are the basic assumptions, what are the features? Okay, then we also looked into the, you know, kind of you know, criticism of, you know, dialectical materialism. Okay, now let's move forward and look into the, you know, the law of dialectics, okay, which was given by Friedrich Engels, because he was, you know, he was also a kind of, you know, a very renowned thinker at that point of time, and he was also one of the friend of Karl Marx. Okay, so this slide, I'll say, is not that important, not that important. Okay, so we'll just have a look at it from a, you know, peripheral point of view, so that you can at least understand. Okay, in case a question come, at least you can write something, you know, because UPSC never fails to surprise us, so at least you can write something. Okay, but I don't think the question will be asked. Okay, this is what my assumption has been. You know, so let's look into various law of dialectics. Dialectics, I already talked about thesis, antithesis, which leads to synthesis. Okay, so now let's look into the various laws of dialectics. Okay, so first one is the law of the unity and the conflict of the opposite. Okay, so look at it, look this into like this: unity and conflict of the opposites. Okay, so you know, this is basically the core of dialectics. Core of dialectics. This is basically the core of dialectics. Okay, and what happened, you know, there are internal tendencies which are mutually exclusive, but at the same time they are inseparable. Okay, I'll write it again here. They are internal tendencies which are mutually exclusive, but at the same time mutually exclusive, but at the same time, you know, inseparable. Okay, inseparable, that is why there is a unity of opposites, and they are mutually exclusive, that is why there is a conflict also. Okay, so what happened, these are basically the core of dialectics, and you know, it is like, you know, a fight between new and old. Okay, it's like a fight between new and old. It's a fight between like new and old. Okay, now how it is like a fight between new and old? It is a fight like, you know, one tries to change while other try to maintain the status quo. Okay, one tries to change while other maintains the it is status quo. Okay, I'll give a very small example. Okay, suppose, you know, if you see, suppose there's a body, human body, you know, there's a human body. Now there are existing two phenomena. Okay, two phenomena are existing, like, you know, human body which is healthy organs, and this also some kind of a disease. Okay, right? Similarly, if I say, you know, they both are, you know, you can say conflict of the opposites, because they both are opposite, plus, you know, some organs are there which are healthy, but since organs are there, then only, or some system is there, then only it will become diseased. Okay, so from this only this is coming. Okay, next, if I have to give an example, you know, today's car, we use, you know, both the petrol version, right, petrol version, as well as CNG, right, petrol version as well as CNG. So these are the small examples that you can use. Okay, even if you say, you know, like if you say today's, you know, all these examples, though it's, you know, it's sufficient for you to, you know, have an understanding. Okay, so it is unity of the opposites. Okay, because, you know, because of one thing, other thing would not have survived. Okay, plus there's a conflict also, because if there's a disease, it has to be tackled by the body. Okay, So that's why unity and as well as the conflict of the opposite. We will not go too much of deep into all those things because this is not required. Okay, even if you can say that, you know, in agriculture, okay, in agriculture also there is a feudalism. You know, if I give an example, suppose if I give an example of, in suppose any, you know, backward state, any backward state, so maybe, you know, there is a capitalist mode of, you know, there's a capitalist kind of agriculture protect, you know, capitalist kind of agricultural practice, you know, where the, you know, people are producing only to generate surplus, to extract profit, and there may be, you know, feudal kind of agri practices which may be existing both at the same time. Okay, and you know, they are both conflicting each other. Okay, so that's how you have to, you know, create an example, so that, you know, you can come up with more and more innovative example. Even for that matter, like in political system, you know, we talk about republic. Okay, but at the same time we have a political dynastic, you know, you know, the role of, or the dynastic family is ruling. Okay, so we talk about at the same time republic, we also talk about the dynastic politics. Okay, so the both are conflicting, and just because, you know, dynastic politics is there, to balance it we also talk about republic, so that you know, there's a unity of opposites. Okay, just because dynastic politics there, with republic comes into play. Okay, so try to visualize all those things. Okay, next is the law of negation of negation. Okay, law of negation of negation. Now what is now what is negation? Okay, what is negation? Now negation means that a new stage which is a product of qualitative change. Okay, new stage which is a product of qualitative change. Okay, new stage, I'll just write it a definition. New stage which is a product of qualitative change. Okay, it's a kind of a new stage which is a product of qualitative change. I'll talk about what is qualitative and quantitative in detail, but it's simply a new stage which is a product of qualitative change. Okay, and it is kind of progressive change to replace old order. Okay, it's a kind of a progressive change to replace, and it is a progressive change to replace old order, right? Progressive change to replace old order, or, you know, old structure. Now if I have to give an example, again a very simple example, you can see from feudalism we move on to, you know, from you know, slavery form of society we move on to, I'll just write example, slavery form of society, we move on to feudalistic form of society. From this we move on to, you know, capitalist form of society, to, you know, socialist form of society, to ultimately communism, right? So it's a negation of negation, means that, you know, feudalistic appeared because we negated this slavery, right? We negated this slavery. Okay, and capitalist emerge because we negated this feudalistic mode of production or feudalistic society, which itself is a negation of slavery. Okay, so that is why it's a law of negation of negation. Okay, socialism was a negation of capitalism, where capitalism itself was a negation of feudalism, and feudalism itself was a negation of slavery. Okay, so very, very simple example that I'm giving. Or you can say, you know, from you know, different kind of you know, if you say religion, earlier the religion was, you know, or predominant religion was magic, then religious ideology, some other ideologies came, and then we became scientific. Okay, something of that sort also you can take an example. Next is law of transition of quantitative to qualitative. Okay, again I'll try to give an example, and I hope you'll be able to understand. Like, what is quantitative and qualitative change? Quantitative change means, quantitative changes means small changes, you know, small changes, like from few you get more, Okay, like from few you get more. So that is a kind of a quantitative change. Qualitative change means an abrupt change. Qualitative change means a kind of complete abrupt change. An abrupt change. Qualitative means a kind of an abrupt change. Okay, so quantitative is small changes, and qualitative means abrupt changes. Now I'll give you an example for quantitative changes and qualitative changes as well. Okay, suppose for independence, if you take pre-independence era, pre-independence era. So here what happens is that during pre-independence era, when our leaders, they started asking for some kind of a concession. So probably they got a concession in the form of in the form of discussion of budget, concession in the form of you can say in terms of, you can say entry to the parliament, all those small concession. So that can be actually highlighted as quantitative changes. Okay, that can be actually highlighted as a quantitative changes. Okay, so small changes like entry to parliament, like getting the permission to fight provincial election, freedom to discuss budget, all those things, right? So these were all you can say kind of quantitative changes. Okay, these are all kind of quantitative changes. Okay, these are all kind of quantitative changes. But what about the qualitative changes? All of a sudden in 1947 we got the independence. Okay, we got the independence. So when we got the independence, this is an abrupt change. Okay, this was called qualitative change. So quantitative change means small changes. Qualitative change means a complete abrupt change. Again, few more examples I'll give you so that it becomes very clear. Okay, like if I have to give an example, like suppose a person is there, he's aging, right? So every year his age is increasing. That means that is a quantitative change, right? Quantitative change, because every year small changes is occurring. But when a person dies, okay, when a person dies, that's a qualitative change. Similarly, suppose a lady become pregnant, so that 9 month, over the whole period of 9 month, that is a gestation period, it is all quantitative change. Small changes in terms of development of fetus, everything is occurring. But when a birth happens, actually it is a kind of a qualitative change, right? Qualitative change. So qualitative change has two aspects. Okay, something that was not existent earlier is now existing, not existent earlier, it is now existing, right? Plus something which was existing earlier now vanished, right? Very simple. Qualitative, quantitative. Okay, so very simple thing. Now let's move on to the next slide. Now various other important terminologies. See, I have already introduced you to the forces of production and the relation of production, and I'll also talk about the other terminologies like methods of production. But now let's look into all those things in a more brief manner so that you can understand. Okay, what are the forces of production? I've already explained that forces of production basically it shows how much human behavior control the nature. Okay, how much human behavior control the nature. Okay, I've already explained it. How much human behavior control the nature. Okay, more advanced the technology is, technology is, you know, more proper nature could be controlled. More effectively the nature could be controlled. Right? More advanced the technology is, more effectively the nature could be controlled. So these are all very basic things. Okay, so what happened, you can say that over the period of time, forces of production, they advance over a period of time, like technology advances. Okay, like earlier you have axe, now you have a mechanical saw. Okay, that which can be used to cut the logs of woods. So what are the forces of production? Okay, forces of production basically are what? Tools, equipments, you can say machines, technology, even skills of the workers, education, in fact even inanimate sources of energy, okay, these are all forces of production. Okay, so this is very example, I have already explained it in a lot detail earlier only. Okay, now what is if I have to ask forces of production, if I have to say, it includes, forces of production includes means of production. This is all, this tech, tools, equipments, machine, machinery, technology, skills, education, inanimate. So these are all forces of production, means of production, because forces of production can be have a broad scope. It also includes labor power. It also includes labor power. Forces of production also include labor power. Now what is labor power? Labor power is the capacity to do some useful work, okay, which add value to the products. Okay, so labor power is the capacity to do useful work which can add, which add value to the product. Capacity to do useful work which add value to product. Okay, just take an example. Capacity मतलब आप कुछ मतलब आपके पास कुछ power है through which because आपके पास labor है, and through labor you are increasing the value of the product. जैसे कि suppose I'll say chair की initial value 10 rupees है, and now you using your labor, you did something, you made it more refined, या उसको paint कर दिया, कुछ भी कर दिया, and now the value of the chair increased to 1000 rupees. So this difference is because of your labor power. Okay, this difference, okay, or increase in the value of product is because of your labor power, and labor power is basically the capacity to do some useful work to increase the value of the product. Okay, very simple. I guess there's no rocket science here. Next is relation of production. I've explained it already, but I'll again say it. Relation of production means that during the production process, people enter into definite relationship with one another. Okay, over the production process, people enter into definite relationship. Okay, for production, people enter into definite relationship. Okay, definite relationship. So it is like you can say that workers and the bosses, they have a relation of production. That relation is of subordination and domination. Okay, worker and boss में क्या है relation? Subordination and domination का. Boss is at dominating position और worker है subordinate position पे. Even worker and worker में क्या है? Coordination and cooperation. Okay, even this relation of production has, if I have to say, even this relation of production has two aspects. Okay, two aspects. One is technical related, another is related to the economic control. Okay, one has technical aspect, other is technical aspect. It's related to economic control. What is economic control? Like ownership of means of production. Okay, ownership of means of production. Like ownership by the bourgeoisie class themselves. Okay, because labor or the working class only have labor to give it to the bourgeoisie class, and for giving their labor they are given wages. Okay, so related to economic control, it is the deals with the ownership of means of production. What about the technical aspect? Okay, technical aspect basically lead with it is basically deals with the actual production of the product. Okay, actual production of the product, actual production of products, right? Actual production of products. Okay, because you are actually coming together, okay, and helping in producing the goods. That's it. Okay, so this is what relation of production is all about. But at the same time, I want to look into the formal definition for forces of production as well as relation of production, because this definition is going to give you a lot of edge over others. Okay, so try to remember all these definitions so that you can write it, okay, in your examination. So forces of formal definition for forces of production means it refers to the material technical aspect of production. Okay, material technical aspect of production as well as the corresponding labor power. See, I was talking about corresponding labor power. So material technical aspect plus labor power and its competencies required in the production process. Okay, so you can use this definition. Okay, use this definition, try to internalize it. Okay, so that you can write it as it is in the examination. Similarly, what is formal definition for the relation of production? It means it refers to social relationship that arise directly. Social relationship that arise directly out of the process of production. Okay, because production process is social in nature, because people come together, they interact, and through interaction, during the process of interaction, they produce a good. Okay, so it refers to social relationship that arise directly out of the process of production. Okay, these social relationship include the relationship between the owner and the non-owners. Okay, which I have talked about, owners and the non-owners. Okay, of the means of production. Okay, these relationships decide and even determine the control and the capacity to possess the product. Okay, product means that who will be controlling the ultimate product, and obviously it will be the capitalist who will be owning the all means of production, all the forces of production. Okay, so this is the formal definition. I want you to internalize it. Okay, try to understand it and also try to internalize it and use it in your exam. Okay, use it while writing an answer. Okay, next is modes of production. Now what is modes of production? Now modes of production is basically, you can talk about this is a particular manner in which people produce and distribute goods to sustain life. Okay, it's a particular manner in which people produce and distribute goods to sustain life. Okay, particular manner in which people produce and distribute goods to sustain life. Right? It's a particular manner in which people produce and distribute goods to sustain life. Okay, so I think it's very easy, because modes of production is basically has two aspects, okay, that I have given already: forces of production and the relation of production. Okay, and it is the forces of production which determines the relation of production. Okay, it is the forces of production which determines the relation of production. Suppose though I've given the example, I think I've given the example, but still I'll give the example again. Suppose in a primitive society, okay, suppose in the primitive society, the forces of productions are very rudimentary, right? The forces of productions are very rudimentary, very primitive, like use sticks, right? Use sticks, bow and arrow, right? And everybody can use this, everybody can make this tools. So everybody has equal, and everybody is equal because everybody can make these tools. Okay, nobody can say that I have the ownership over sticks or bow and arrow, because they are very rudimentary. They are technically very less advanced. Okay, technically very less advanced. They are at the very initial stage. सब लोग बो एंड एरो बना सकते हैं, सभी स्टिक्स यूज कर सकते हैं, सभी स्टोन यूज कर सकते हैं, स्टोन टू हंट हंटिंग पीपल एंड ऑल, हंटिंग एनिमल्स एंड ऑल दोस थिंग्स. सो फोर्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शंस बहुत ही मतलब रूडिमेंट्री स्टेज में होते हैं, बहुत ही प्रिमिटिव होते हैं. एज अ रिजल्ट here nobody can say that I own stick or I own bow and arrow, because everybody can make it. As a result, the relation of production is that everything is communally owned by the community. Owned by community. Everything is owned by the community. Land, all the resources are owned by the community, and there is complete cooperation. This complete cooperation, coordination, and nobody is boss or nobody is a worker. Everybody is equal. So relation of production is like nobody is boss. There is no relation of domination or subordination. So forces of production determines the relation of production. Okay, so let's look into the I've given the basic definition. Now let's have a look into the formal definition of modes of production. Okay, modes of production. So let's look into the formal definition, but again I'm telling you, use this definition so that you can utilize it in your answer. Okay, so mode of production is the relation between the relationship between the relation of production. Okay, it is the relationship between the relation of production. Okay, it is already given, relation of production and the forces of production. Forces of production. Modes of production can be distinguished from one another by different relationship. Okay, different relationship between forces and relation of production, because in every mode of production there is a different relationship between the forces of production and the relation of production. Okay, I'll tell you, because when I'll talk about how different modes of productions are there and how the law of dialectics helps in helps in explaining how the changes takes place, how the society evolved from one mode of production to different mode of production. I'll try to simplify it for you. Okay, so this was all about modes of production. Now again, various modes of production that I'm going to talk about. Okay, various modes of production. So all these modes of production which Karl Marx basically talks about, and how how the society changes from one mode of production to different other another mode of production, like how society changes from primitive communism mode of production to ancient mode of production. From there it changes to feudal, then capitalist, and from there to socialist, and ultimately the communist mode of production, where complete equality exists. Okay, so now let's look into the different kind of modes of production. First one is primitive communal form of society, which or mode of production. Primitive communal form of society, mode of production. Okay, so let's look into the basic features first. What are the basic features? The basic feature here is that all are equal, and primitive activity was gathering and hunting, right? So all are equal, and primitive or the main activity was gathering and hunting. So basic feature is all are equal, right? All are equal, and primitive activity was hunting and gathering. Okay, very simple. All are equal, and primitive activity was hunting and gathering. Okay, very simple. Next is production, which means that everybody was taking part in the production process. Okay, and all the resources were means of production, all the means of production, all the means of productions, like all the forces of production, labor power, everything was owned by the community, owned by community, because everybody was equal. There was an equality in the society, right? There was an equality in the society. So means of production was owned by the community overall. Okay, and the tools were very primitive here. Okay, if you talk about even the means of production, the forces of production, we talk about, the tools were very primitive. Tools were primitive. As I talked about earlier in the slide, tools were primitive, like stick, bow and arrow, stone. Okay, so they were very primitive. Okay, what about the relation of production? The relationship, because everybody was equal, so what happened? There was a complete coordination. There was a complete coordination and cooperation. Complete coordination, cooperation. There was a mutual assistance. Mutual assistance. Right? Mutual assistance. Okay, so there was a complete equality. There was a complete equality, and there was no private. No, there was no case of private ownership. There was no case of private ownership. Okay, in fact, you can say that it was a complete classless society. It was a complete classless society. Okay, very simple. There's no rocket science. Okay, this is a kind of mode of production that I'm talking about. Okay, next is that I'll just have to talk about how the application of law of dialectical materialism can occur. How primitive communism mode of production changed to slave form of society. Okay. Now here, as I've said, there's a complete equality. No private ownership was there. Classless society. There was no exploitation as such. There was no exploitation as such. There was no exploitation. Okay. But what happens that all of a sudden, the primitive communism or primitive communist society changed into the slave form of society. Here you can say that because with the rise in the with the improvement in the tools, okay, with the improvement in the tools, like the invention of metal tools. Okay, I'll just write it here, with the invention of metal tools. Invention of metal tools. Okay, fire. Okay, agricultural produce increases, because here earlier what happened, the produce was only that much which is required for subsistence level. Okay, there was no surplus of anything. Okay, there was no surplus, remember that. Okay, there's invention of metal tools. Okay, because productive force keep on changing. Okay, so the tools which are primitive, like you can say stone, stick, bow and arrow. So there was an invention of metal tools. Okay, fire plus agriculture produce were there. Okay, so what happened, this community structure broke into family, right? Community structure broke into the family structure. Family structure which lay claim to forces of production, which lay claim to forces of production, like metal tools or more and more surplus things. Okay, so as a result, what happened, the kind of private ownership arose. Okay, the kind of private ownership, the idea of private ownership arose. Okay, and family claim that they claim that they own the means of production. Okay, so now there was a contradiction between the people who wanted to stick to the old system, like everything should be owned by the community, and the family which now claim that they have they have an excess, or they have a ownership of means of production, like new tools or fire and all those things. Okay, so as a result, what happened, the contradiction occurred between the old people, or the people who want to go back to the old system, or make sure that the old system doesn't change, and the people who want to change the old system and make a progress to the next, next level of society. So as the contradiction occur, what happen? Kind of a dialectics happen, and as the dialectics happen, what happened? A new form of society emerged, that is slavery form of society or slavery mode of production kind of thing happened. Okay, so this is how you can say. Plus you can also say that, I'll just say that earlier it was a primitive communism, primitive communism or primitive communal form of society. Okay, or you can say primitive communism form of society was there. Okay, so this slavery form of society is basically came into existence. So this existence of slavery form of society is basically a qualitative change. Qualitative change. Small changes like invention of metal tools, fires, more agricultural produce is being done. Okay, excuse me. Animal husbandry is going on, cultivation is cultivation is going on. All these things are small quantitative changes. Okay, and when the contradiction went beyond control, the slavery mode of production came into existence. This is a kind of a qualitative change. So primitive communism form of society ceased to exist, and the slavery kind of a society form of society came into existence. So this is a qualitative change, and this slavery kind of a society is basically a negation of primitive communism. Remember that it's a negation of negation, that law that I told you. So it is basically the slavery form of society basically is a negation, because we are negating the primitive communism. Okay, and how you can see that how the productive forces, okay, the forces of productions are changing, because of which the relation of production is changing. Okay, because when the invention of metal tools, fires, agricultural, agri produce increases, cultivation is there, all those things are there. So especially the invention of metal tools, like one family did the invention with respect to metal tools. Earlier it was simple wood tools or something, sticks and bow and arrow. So they claim that they now own the forces of production. So now because of this changed the relation of production. So first forces of production will change, then the relation of production will change. Okay, so try to visualize it. It will bring small, these are quantitative changes. It will bring overall qualitative changes when primitive communism changed to slavery mode of slavery form of society. And slavery form of society is basically a negation of primitive communism. Okay, next let's talk about ancient mode of production. Okay, so what is ancient mode of production? Okay, I have given what part, so I want you to tell me a kind of in a very brief manner, okay, that what exactly ancient mode of production is, and then we will look into the different aspects, basic features, production, relation of production, and how the dialectics work here. Okay, when I'm talking about all those things, I'm also telling you different kind of modes of productions as well. Okay, so need not study mode of production separately. Okay, this is already included here. So what is ancient mode of production? Is a kind of a production system in which the master has the control over the slaves. Okay, master has the control. I'll just say it's a kind of a production system, where master have the control over the slave. Master has control over the slaves. Master have control over the slaves. Okay, and whatever slaves produce, right? Whatever slaves produce. So they appropriate, masters appropriate whatever slave produce. Okay, so it's a kind of a production system. I've just given a very layman language definition. In fact, what happened, the slaves never had any kind of right. They had no right with respect to you can say they have no right with respect to reproduction. They have no right with respect to any kind of liberty, whether it's civil liberty, political liberty. They were simply treated like an animal. They have no existence only. Okay, so now let's look into the basic feature here. First time, okay, here first time the social inequality arises. Social inequality arises. Okay, here first time the social inequality arises and it leads to the formation of slave form of society. Slave form of society. Okay, so ancient mode of production or ancient society is also known as slave form of society. Okay, so this is also known as slave form of society. So now what is production? Production means that as the population increases, okay, as the population increases, okay, as the population increases, what happened? The slaves were pressurized to produce more. Okay, so what are the forces of production? See, there was a there was a kind of, you can say that there was a advancement in forces of production as well. Now what are the advancement? You can say that tools like iron tools were developed. Okay, you can say that different kind of the agriculture produce also increased. Okay, so you can say here you can see the forces of production. Earlier it was metal tools. From metal tools it were improved further like iron tools. Okay, cultivation increased more. Okay, animal husbandry was there. Okay, so as more and more metal tools were advanced, okay, the relation of production was also completely different. Here everything that was produced here was completely owned by masters. Whatever slaves produced, everything was owned by the masters. Okay, so again in the relation of production, the relation was of domination and subordination. This was the relation of production. Okay, that it was of domination and subordination. So now how the dialectics occur? Okay, how the dialectics occur? You can also say that those slaves had no rights, right? Slaves had no rights. They were treated like animals. Okay, so they never had any kind of interest in increasing the production or whatever, so what happened? Over a period of time they revolted against their own masters. As a result, because of the revolt, what happened? You can say it led to the formation of a feudalistic form of society. So this feudalistic form of society is basically a kind of a qualitative changes, and small changes like metal tools, like iron tools, more and more cultivation, animal husbandry. Okay, all these things, okay, you can say that these are all quantitative changes. Okay, and small changes led to the proper overall qualitative changes like feudalistic mode of feudalistic form of society. This is a kind of qualitative change. Okay, and small changes in the forces of production leads to quantitative changes. So what happened? You can say that over the period of time, this qualitative change is basically a negation of ancient society. Ancient society is basically kya? It was a slave society. You remember, slave society was a negation of primitive communism. So feudalistic is basically a negation of ancient society or slave society, and slave society was itself a negation of primitive communism. So it was a law of negation of negation. Okay, I think you are getting it. Try to visualize it. It's very simple. Okay, so this is how you can talk about ancient mode of production. Okay, next is feudalistic mode of production. Now what is feudalistic mode of production? Again, you can think of all these things because these are very very easy. I want you to do some kind of brainstorming also, but I also want to add one more thing before I go further, that in the primitive society, if I go back, in the primitive society there was no exploitation. You remember I said there was no exploitation, right? There was no exploitation. Why? Because the reason was that, first of all, the tools were very primitive. Tools were very primitive. Everybody can make all these tools, right? Tools were very primitive. Plus everybody should come together to fight against the forces of the nature. Okay, everybody should come together to fight against the forces of the nature. Okay, that is why there was no exploitation. That was the point I missed. That's why I'm adding here. Next is, even in ancient mode of production, this was the first time the social inequality arises, and this is the case where human exploiting human started. Human exploiting, the practice of human exploiting human started. Okay, the practice that human exploiting human started. Okay, so next is feudalistic mode of production, which means that where we have feudal lords as well as serfs or the peasants. Okay, so here it means, if I have to give an what exactly it means, so I'll say there's a kind of a productive system. It's a kind of productive system where the feudal lords owns the produces, owns the serfs basically, and also surplus produce by them. Now here understand the difference. Okay, earlier what happened, that earlier in the slave society, whatever slaves were producing, everything was taken away by the lords or by their masters. They were given only that much so that they don't die of starvation. Here in feudalistic mode of production, it is a kind of productive system where feudal lords own the serfs. Okay, they not only own the serfs, but they also appropriate surplus labor, okay, from the serfs. Okay, they own the surplus, or they take over the surplus produced by them in the form of rent. Okay, so they were given certain degree of freedom here. Okay, unlike earlier society where there was no degree of freedom. Okay, next is, what is the basic features? Okay, what are the basic features? I think you can just give a point. Basic feature here is that society was divided into feudal lords and the serfs, right? This is a basic feature. Whole society was divided into feudal lords and serfs, right? Very simple. Okay, now what are the means of production? All the means of production, that is the forces of productions and everything, was forces of production, everything was owned by the feudal lord. Everything owns by feudal lords. Okay, everything is owned by the feudal lords. However, there is a change in the force of production. Okay, because for force of production continuously develop, they use you can say inanimate sources of energy like water, wind. Okay, now forces of production continuously changes or continuously developed, continuously change, like inanimate sources of energy. Inanimate sources of energy is being used, tapped source of energy is being tapped. Okay, inanimate sources of energy is being tapped. Then you can also say that new market explode, new discoveries were there, minings were there. Okay, new discoveries, new discoveries were there, new mining, mining activities were taking place, plus new markets were explored because of colonialism, right? So all these things happened in a very rapid manner. Okay, so what happened, population was also increasing, so the consumption was also increasing, right? Population was increasing, so the consumption was also increasing. Population was increasing, so the consumption was also increasing. So how forces of production continuously changes, inanimate source of energy, new discoveries, new mining, mining activities were taking place, नए नए मार्केट मिल रहे हैं because colonialism, because European states were acquiring the colonies in different continents. तो नया मार्केट मिल रहा है, तो डिमांड्स, प्रोडक्ट्स की डिमांड्स बढ़ रही है, प्रोडक्ट्स की डिमांड बढ़ रही है, तो ऑब्वियस बात है क्या हो रहा है, कंज्यूमरिज्म बहुत ज़्यादा हो रहा है. ओके, सो व्हाट हैपन, these forces of production earlier, the relation of production was of earlier, domination and subordination, again domination and subordination between feudal lords and serfs, So what happened, because of the change in the forces of production, this results in the change in the relation of production. Now because of mass production, okay, factory based production came into existence because of mass scale manufacture. So what happened, that serfs want to get change the relation of production, in the sense, because continuously inanimate source of energy, factory based production, mechanized force of production. So जैसे mechanized आप ultimately ना सब कुछ basically technically advance हो गए हैं, तो जैसे factory based production आ रहा है. So what happened, the serf who were attached to the land, now they want to be free. Okay, they want to be free so that they can go and work somewhere else. Okay, and they can exercise certain degree of freedom, because now earlier they were attached to the land. So they revolted against their own. So what happened, the serfs, they revolted against their feudal lords, and as a result a capitalist mode of society came into existence. Capitalist society came into existence. Okay, so this capitalist society, okay, is basically a negation of, it is result of negation of feudalistic mode of production. Very simple. Feudalistic mode of production, when was negated, it led to the capitalist society, existence of capitalist society. And feudalistic society was itself a negation of ancient society, and ancient society itself was a negation of what, it was a negation of primitive communism kind of a society. Now here small changes, like change in the productive forces, inanimate sources of energy and all those things, plus what happened is that because the population was increasing, colonialism was increasing, factory based production was increasing, everything was becoming mechanized. So there were small quantitative changes, and those quantitative changes led to the qualitative change. This was qualitative change, where feudalistic society was overthrown and capitalist society came into existence. Okay, so this is how the dialectics work, negation of negation, quantitative to qualitative. Okay, and how the dialectic works between the forces of production and the relation of production. Okay, next is the capitalist mode of production. Okay, the capitalist mode of production. Now what is capitalist mode of production? It's a kind of a production system where the owners of the means of production, the owners of the means of production extract surplus or profit from the working class. Okay, it's a kind of productive system. Where owners extract profit from workers. Okay, is a kind of productive system where owners extract profit from the workers. Okay, they extract profits of the profit, or extract surplus from the proletariat in terms of profits. Okay, so you can say simply productive system where owners who owns the means of production, they extract the profit from the workers. Okay, they extract the profit from the workers. So this is basically what is capitalist mode of production is all about. Okay, now let's look into the basic features. First I look into the kind of introduction. Okay, so introduction basically talks about the feudal lords. Okay, you can say the feudal lords became the capitalist. Okay, and the serfs became the working class. Okay, so you can say the feudal lords became the capitalist because they had the money earlier, right? And the serfs became the working class people who were now, though earlier they were attached to land, now they are not attached to any land. They can go and work anywhere, though they will be exploited everywhere they go, because anywhere they go to work in the factory, the main intention of the capitalist will be to extract as much profit as as possible from the working class. Okay, now there are certain characteristics. Okay, there are certain characteristics that I want you to remember. Just a minute. What are the characteristics? As per Thomas, just a minute. As per the Thomas Baltimore, there are certain characteristics. Okay, there are certain characteristics which is very important for you to understand. Okay, first one is that the good produced are not for sale. Okay, so sorry, the good produced are for sale and not for use. Okay, the good produced are not for use but for a sale. Okay, good produce are not for use but for a sale. Okay, very simple. Next is that the labor power exchanges for the money, that the people are giving their labor power. Okay, this is first. Second is that the labor power exchanges for money. Okay, very simple. There is no rocket science. After this you can say that the use of money is use of money is for exchange purpose. Okay, or you can say money is used for exchange purpose. Okay, see all those characteristics that I'm telling you by Thomas B. Baltimore. He has written a very very important book for for sociology that you can also read, but the content that I'm giving you, that is more than sufficient, so there is no need to read all these books. So all these characteristics you should know by heart. Okay, next is that production process is controlled by the the production process is controlled by the capitalist. Okay, the production process जो होता है, production process is controlled by capitalist. Okay, plus the financial decisions are also controlled by the capitalist. Okay, financial decisions are also controlled by capitalist. Financial decisions are also controlled by capitalist. Okay, and lastly is that individual capitalist, what happened, that individual capitalist control over labor and finances. Okay, individual capitalist, they try to control, I'm talking about individual capitalist they try to control over labor एंड फाइनेंसेस। ओके, सो 6 कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स मैंने आपको दे दिए हैं, ठीक है। ये 6 की 6 कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स आपको मुजवानी याद होनी चाहिए, है ना, आप एकदम रट्टाफिकेशन कर लीजिए, दिस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। राइट इट, अगर कैपिटलिस्ट मोड ऑफ प्रोडक्शन आता है, व्हाट इज कैपिटलिज्म, व्हाट इज कैपिटलिस्ट मोड ऑफ प्रोडक्शन मैंने आपको पहले बता रखा है। देन you know what is the definition of capitalist mode of production, okay, what is the introduction, what is the characteristics as per the TB Baltimore, इनको highlight जरूर करिए TB Baltimore को, okay, TB Baltimore को highlight जरूर करिए, it will give you edge, and सारे इनके characteristics जरूर आप बताइएगा, ठीक है। next is what is the production process, what is the production process, here the production process is that production is social but appropriation is private, okay, you can get it, I think, because all the means of productions are owned by the capitalists. So here the production process is social, but ownership is individual, or appropriation of final product is individual, okay. So what is the relation of production, what is the relation of production here, what happened that over the period of time the people, the working class, they enter into a kind of a social contract with the bourgeoisie class, okay. Bourgeoisie class and the working class, they enter into a kind of a social relationship, contact, kind of a social relationship, okay, which is basically of domination and subordination, okay. मैंने आपको पहले बता रखा व्हाई इट इज सोशल, बिकॉज जब आप एक फैक्ट्री होती है, आई अगेन एक्सप्लेन इट टू इन हिंदी लैंग्वेज, जब एक फैक्ट्री बनती है, व्हाट हैपन इज दैट पीपल कम टुगेदर, वहाँ पे एक साथ आप रहते हैं, एंड यू इंटरेक्ट विद द पीपल, नॉट ओनली यू इंटरेक्ट विद द, आप सबसे बात ही नहीं करते हैं, बट आप अपने बॉस से भी बात करते हैं, एंड इन द प्रोसेस यू इंटरेक्ट, सो दैट इज व्हाई इट इज अ सोशल प्रोसेस, okay. So the production is a social process, so it's a kind of a contract social relationship where the relationship is of domination and subordination, okay. So I think very easy, relation of production is very easy, okay. Plus you can say that people work for the wages, okay. Proletariat work for the wages, and they are being shown, okay, proletariat or the working class people, they work for the wages, and they are being shown that everything is fine. I talked about false consciousness and class in itself, class for its class in itself and class for itself. So all those things, okay, will be very much useful here, because dialectics not only work between the forces of production, relation of production, but the dialectics also works between the classes, okay. And here the class interest conflicts, the class interest of workers and the class interest of bourgeoisie conflict. As a result, over the period of time, what happened, all the proletariat, they revolt against the bourgeoisie or the capitalist class, okay. Capitalist class, why, because their interests are being not, they are being treated like animals, their interests are not being met. Plus over the period of time also, you can say that there's lots and lots of things happening in terms of forces of production, like more technological, it becomes more and more advanced, the various forces of production, like you can say railways have happened, or you can say canalization of river has become, telegraphs has emerged, okay. So different kind of forces of production also emerged, and the dialectics also happens between the different classes of people as well, okay. So always remember, dialectics not only happening between the forces of production and the relation of production, but dialectics also happening between the different classes of people, that you can, though I have explained it in terms of only forces of production, relation of production, it is your homework to apply it, that how dialectics work between different classes of people, especially in slave society, in feudal society, and in the capitalist society, okay. So I am earlier I have explained dialectics in terms of forces of production, relation of production. I am here talking about dialectics between the classes, that their needs are not being fulfilled, and they, from class, class in itself, they become class for itself when they develop a subjective understanding of objective reality, that they are actually being exploited. Okay, and over the period of time they are just being given minimum wages and made to work for many hours, and at the same time bourgeoisies are living luxurious life, and they are kind of a kind of a blood sucking animal kind of a thing. They are sucking whatever proletariats are producing. Even the final products are being appropriated by the bourgeoisie. As a result, with the revolt, this capitalist mode of production ceased to exist, and the socialist mode of production comes into existence. Socialist mode of production comes into existence. So this is a basically qualitative change, right? Small change in forces of production and all those things was a quantitative change. And this socialist mode of production is basically a negation. It is a negation of capitalist mode of production, right? As capitalist mode of production was a negation of feudalistic mode of production, which itself was a negation of slavery, or ancient mode of production, which itself was a negation of primitive communism. Okay, so very simple, no logic. Okay, just very simple, though it is no rocket science. You can simply apply, because I have explained already in detail. Okay, next is the socialist and the communist. See, earlier I've already talked about capitalist mode of production change into socialist mode of production. Now here I'll not go into too much of detail, but I'll just tell you, in socialist mode of production what happens is that the bourgeoisies, they are overtoppled, and everything is taken over by the proletariat. Okay, everything is taken over by the proletariat in the socialist mode of production. Okay, in the socialist mode of production, proletariat toppled the bourgeoisie class. Okay, proletariat they control all the means of production. Okay, they control all the means of production. Say they topple bourgeoisie class. Okay, and you can say that there is a public ownership of means of production. Okay, there's a public ownership of means of production. So there's a public ownership of means of production. So I think you can connect. Okay, because when you the concept of private property completely vanish. Okay, so what happened, when the private property vanishes with the complete negation of capitalist form of society, and with the socialist form of society, the private ownership ceased to exist. Okay, and here everybody is given the produce, whatever is being produced as per the needs. Okay, so you can just experience in terms of you can say that it's a kind of a dictatorship of proletariat. Okay, it's a kind of dictatorship of proletariat. And in the dictatorship of proletariats, you can imagine, I'll just write it, dictatorship of proletariat, and I can just you can just imagine that somebody or kind of a state is controlling the means of production on the behalf of the people. Okay, so even this, that state is controlling all the means of production on the behalf of people. Okay, state controlling everything on behalf of people. So even what happened, even here you can say that this is being converted to a complete classless society. There is no contradiction, there is no class, complete equality is there. Okay, and the dictatorship of the dictatorship of proletariat vanishes. Okay, and plus there is no state. It is a complete stateless society. Okay, so but here again the law of dialectics, here also the dialectics happen. the contradiction occurs. And what is a contradiction? Though contradiction doesn't occur in terms of you can say between classes or anything, but the contradiction still remains in the sense that now the technological the forces of production are technologically very advanced. The forces of productions are technologically very advanced, very advanced. And now the contradiction occur between the forces of production, or the you can say humans. The contradiction occur between the humans and the nature, just like it was earlier existed between humans and nature in the primitive communism. It is same as the contradiction that was occurring in the primitive communism. Okay, primitive communism. Okay, primitive communism. So that's how you can say that it is it was a kind of a utopian concept. You can say that he says that the complete Marx says that complete class society will be established. There will be no class, complete everybody will be equal. There will be no state, complete stateless society, and dialectics completely unfold itself. But still the contradiction remains, and the contradiction remains between human and the nature. And as the technological force becomes more and more advanced, okay, so what happened, that the nature is now being exploited more and more efficiently. Okay, nature is being exploited more and more efficiently. Okay, that is the only difference. So from socialist to communist, this is the final stage. This is the final stage. Okay, where the dictatorship of proletariat or some kind of state apparatus basically is overthrown, and a complete classless and stateless society is established. Okay, now next is Asiatic mode of production. See, I talked about all these mode of production. Okay, but Marx basically talks about how the dialectics appears in primitive, ancient, and all those things. But at the same time I want to say that this Asiatic mode of production, this is also one type of mode of production that exists. And Marx was of the opinion this Asiatic mode of production was typically of the Asian society. It was not part of a Western society. Okay, that is why it is called Asiatic mode of production. Okay, so what are the basic features? The basic feature of is this, that it is similar to characteristics of characteristic which is prevailing in primitive communism. Okay, so it is similar to the characteristics prevailing in primitive communism, right? Primitive communism, right? Similar to characteristics which were prevailing in primitive communism. Okay, so like now after this, what are the means of production? Again, very simple means of production. Basically you can say that everything everything was owned by the community. Okay, all the means of production was owned by the community. Production was owned by the community. Okay, so I think you have a basic idea. You may say that this is same as primitive communism, but primitive communism and this Asiatic mode of communism or Asiatic mode of production was actually never considered by Marx as a part of Western society. It was typically of Asiatic society, and it has almost same characteristic as primitive communism. Okay, so that is why similar characteristics prevailing in primitive communism. What are the means of production? The means of productions was owned by the community completely. Okay, and what happens is that overall you can say that it is the ownership of land is communal. Okay, ownership of land is communal. Ownership of land is communal, and there's a complete coordination, coordination, cooperation, complete coordination and cooperation, and mutual assistance. Mutual assistance was there. Okay, in terms of relation of production. So this is not that much different with respect to primitive communism. Okay, I would just wanted to introduce you to that terminology so that at least you can talk about. And everybody was equal, and here the equality exists just like in primitive communism. So there was a complete equality. Okay, there are certain characteristics that you can talk about in Asiatic mode of production. Okay, so this is all about Asiatic mode of production. Okay, I think there's nothing else that needs to be discussed. Okay, plus what you can say is, as I've already mentioned, they are prevalent in Asia. So these are small things. If a 10 marker question kind of comes, you can simply write it, almost write it in terms of primitive communism. Okay, if you have to write something else, you can say that it refers to the community based production system. Okay, where ownership of land is communal. Okay, so you can simply write it refers to community based production system, where ownership of land is community based. Okay, the land is based owned by the community itself. Okay, so this is what everything was about Asiatic mode of production. Now what are the criticism? Okay, overall what are the criticism of this whole you can say the mode of production? Okay, first is Raymond Aron. Okay, first one is Raymond Aron. And I have given all the thinkers. Don't think that you will not be able to understand or remember. Try to use them in your words, try to use them in your answers, in fact, and when you use them in your answer, you'll be able to retain it as much as possible. So first one was Raymond Aron. Now he was very famous French philosopher who said that socialism is similar to capitalism only. Okay, he says that socialism, it's similar to capitalism only. Capitalism. Why? Because he was a very famous French philosopher. Famous French philosopher. Just like well, like Marx said that society will evolve from primitive to feudal, primitive to slave to feudal to capitalist to socialist to communism. But he Raymond Aron, French philosopher, said that socialism is almost similar to capitalism. There is no difference, because here it was the dictatorship of proletariat was going on. And here it was kind of a bourgeoisie who were ruling the roost. So what's the difference? Okay, next is Max Weber. Now Max Weber said that it is very difficult to determine the beginning and end of history. Okay, it is very difficult to determine the beginning and the end of history. Like, difficult to determine beginning and end of history. There is no sequence, there is no order in sequence. Just like USA, it is USA is still in capitalism phase. What about Russia? From communism, which is should be the the ultimate reality, it is now moving towards capitalism. So the trend that was given by the Karl Marx, that from primitive communism to slavery from the society to feudalistic to capitalism to communism. Okay, here socialism also occur. So but here communism almost has failed and it is moving towards capitalism. So there is no order here only. Okay, next is Stanislavski Ossowski. Okay, so he was a Polish sociologist. So what did he say? Stanislavski, what does he say? He says that classes are present in every society. Okay, he says that classes are present in every society. What does it mean? That even if in a classless society, okay, if I say that classes are present in every society. So suppose if I am talking about communism phase only, okay, the ultimate where there will be no state, no complete classes society, okay, even there some people will emerge to control some means of production, like a bureaucratic organization which will try to manage everything. So you cannot say that the classes are present, you can simply say that classes are present in every society, and eventually even if there is no classes, ultimately, you know, over the period of time some kind of classes will emerge. Okay, so you cannot say that the classless society will, you know, keep on going till perpetuity. Okay, next is Wilfred Pareto. He was again a very renowned, you know, sociologist. I'll just remove all the ink. So he was also a very renowned sociologist. Okay, and the Pareto basically talks about that, you know, he said that if there is any kind of, you know, proletariat revolution, so it will be replaced by one group, or one group will be replaced by the other group. Okay, so if there is any kind of a proletariat revolution, any kind of proletariat revolution occurs, so what happened, one group will be replaced by other group. Okay, you can say that, you know, a person may occur, or the group of people may occur, which may ultimately lead to the again class based society. Okay, next is Ralph Dahrendorf. Okay, again a very famous sociologist. I talked about him in the, you know, differential authority. So he says that, you know, he says about differential authority, which means that conflict not only because of, you know, economic factors, but also because of differential authority in the society. Okay, so as per the Marx, because Marx was of the opinion that conflict is because only of the economic factors, so he said it is not only the economic factors which is reason for the conflict. Okay, this was completely rejected by the Ralph Dahrendorf, and he says that the other reason could be, you know, differential authority that can also lead to conflict in the society. Differential authority means, you know, like I have certain authority, I've explained it earlier, but again I'm explaining. मेरे पास कुछ authority है, but थोड़े सा certain ज़्यादा power किसी और के पास है, तो मैं उस आदमी को थोड़ा अपने आप equal समझूंगा. ठीक है, so if there is a clash of opinion, the contradiction will appear. So conflict can, you know, happen. So differential authority is also maybe a very important reason for, you know, the conflict. Feminist also, they talked about this, feminist, you know, where they say that Marx completely ignored the feminist dimension of production. Okay, Marx completely ignored the feminist dimension of production, which means, you know, Marx ignored feminist dimension of production. Feminist dimension of production, which means that, you know, the women have a double burden. They not only have to work at the factory, but they also have to work at the, you know, factories, plus also have to work at the home. So they have a double burden, which was not taken into account by the Marxists. So they were having a double burden that working for in the factories as well, and also, you know, at the not only the factories but also at the, you know, home. So they were having a double burden. Okay, next is economic reductionist. They say that, you know, society changes. Okay, we say that, you know, there's a narrow focus, and all this, you know, the society changes or all the social phenomena have been explained in economic terms only. Okay, the conflict or all the social phenomena, conflict, or I'll just, you know, all conflicts or explaining any kind of social phenomena, you know, explained in terms of economic factors only. Economic factors only. Okay, so you remember I gave you the term, the Karl Popper. right? Karl Popper, remember his name, he only gave this term, economic reductionist. Okay, next is Zetlin. Okay, Zetlin, Irving Zetlin. Okay, he says that uh, people people may not behave as per their class positions. Okay, people may not behave as per their class position, but they may behave on the basis of various other factors, like behavior is not contingent upon their classes. Okay, it can also be determined by the caste factors, right? Maybe religious factors. And Marx was of the opinion that he always looks at people from class perspective. Okay, he always looks at people from class perspective, but the action or the behavior of the people can be determined by various other factors, like apart from classes, it can be caste factors or religion factors, or for that matter son of soil kind of a thing, like I know that person, so accordingly I'll behave with him or her. Okay, so other factors are also there. So these are all the criticism of the mode of production. Okay, now friend, that marks the end of today's session, where we look into historical materialism, we look into mode of production. Even in the mode of production, I talked about all the modes of production, right from ancient primitive communism to ancient to feudalistic to capitalist, then to socialist and communist. And 3-4 part, primitive, ancient, feudalistic and capitalist are very important, because that's where you can apply your law of dialectics. Plus I've also talked about one more mode of production, because while talking about how the society changes from one stage to another stage, I've also talked briefly about Asiatic mode of production. So I've talked about overall mode of productions, okay, plus how this overall law of dialectics can be applied to the society, and how it changes from one form to one stage to another. Okay, so all the things have been covered properly. Now we will see you soon in the next lecture. Okay, thank you so much.